Well, then, how about Bobby Lashley's win? Oh wait, Chris Statlander's win. Oh wait, no. Let's talk about Kenny Omega being back. Promo at the end of the show, they built it up well. Made it out to be a big deal. His grand kind of remixed ring entrance. It was serious Kenny Omega. He was dressed like a star, acted like somebody who's been through hell. Talked about his journey and got fired up, I think, at an appropriate level. And then Don Callis, who I advocate for being a weekly fixture on television, like 5 out of 6 weeks he should be on there, just being a reason people tune in because they just want to see him get his comeuppance. He interrupts the party, says welcome back from the dead, or something like that, and then his crew attacks him, and then Will Ospreay makes a save with a chair, and then there's a tense moment with Ospreay and Omega. A lot happened there. I would have been actually happy if they just had Omega do a promo and didn't have Callis come out. I think they could have gotten away with that, but it's not like a critique. I'm just saying the promo was good enough, and he's a big enough star, and I don't think, I know Tony Khan thinks everybody knows everything about his journey because it's been out there and, circulation. I think a lot of viewers didn't know a lot of those details. So that could have stood on its own. But that said, things got heated up at the end. I'm curious for your take.
Yeah. And, these are things we've addressed in the past. I keep remembering I was on the last night Kenny was on, and he obviously had a rough night, and I felt bad for no real reason after the fact. It's like, well, he wasn't dressed very well, he didn't present himself very well, all this stuff. And I really like the new theme music. And
was it Game of Thronesy, or like, was it, the video felt kind of like they were conjuring, but there was probably something else they were going for.
With Kenny, it's probably some obscure video game I've
probably never, so. Yeah, you're right. I should know better. Yeah.
Never experienced before, but it was good, which is what really matters. And so the whole presentation was really good. I think I would agree with you. Like, I think it's fine that he's wrestling next week. Brian Cage is, it's a feeder type thing, but I think they could have let the interview stand on its own and then say they're going to interview him again next week and then have Don Callis interrupt. Mm-hmm. There's no reason to rush through this. And yeah, the announcers told a little bit about his and Will's backstory, but they left a lot up to the imagination there. And then Kenny did a good job explaining his entire journey pretty well in a condensed amount of time. And he presented himself like a star. We've talked about this before. I think he has a reluctance to do this and to come out and be, serious wrestler, number one wrestler in the world star presentation. But I thought, he did a good job at it. And so I would give that entire segment a thumbs up. And, I obviously nothing can match what I saw on Sunday. And I'm assuming you've seen it by now. Yeah. Wow. In the New Japan presentation, Kenny Omega probably remains my favorite presentation of any wrestler in the last 20 years. So there's that. But for the moment, what they did, I thought they did a good job.
So first of all, we're getting hectored and lectured. It was the guy who did Kenny's entrance also did the music for Final Fantasy. If you asked me to guess a video game, I probably would have said that. I'm sure it's been all over the news, and I just my eyes glazed over for it's not my world.
I gave up in my class knowing all the pop culture references a long time ago, so you're not going to shame me about it. I just take the L's and move on, and that seems to be the way to work with 20-year-olds. Like you say, I'm not the cool guy, and you can inform me of these things, and I work at it. I try. You're not going to embarrass me. I appreciate the information.
I think they're shaming us because it's like, well, maybe either we should have known or it was out there already. And
I think
how can you not know?
He mentioned who composed his music on Sunday on Twitter, and I just
there you go.
So okay, but yeah.
Well, I'm barely on Twitter. Okay, so let's talk about something else here. Well, you brought it up, and Derek Hubbard in the chat mentioned this. Omega performed spectacularly on Sunday. It's amazing how different his aura is in New Japan compared to AEW. Some of it is him. Some of it is the promotion. It's so different. And he added, I hope he brings his New Japan aura to this run in AEW. Yes. Nothing funny, silly, insider, or tongue-in-cheek. What do you think about tonight's version of Omega compared to the New Japan version, compared to the old AEW version? And do you think Derek already got his wish, or do you think there's some more room to go, or just too small a sample size to declare anything?
I was texting with your co-host Todd Martin, and I said what they need to do is pay New Japan to run a show at 8, I don't know the time zones, but 10 in the morning or whatever, and broadcast it live to the United States and call it Dynamite. And tongue somewhat in cheek because they can't, and it doesn't even have to be the Tokyo Dome. You know, he could do Budokan Hall and it would still be special. Like Derek's exactly right. That you can't replicate that New Japan presentation. And I wish you could. And I think AEW could take some steps to do a better job of getting closer, but they're always going to be missing something there. So this was a pretty, this was good, but it is on a scale. I mean, it's not the New Japan presentation.
How much is just the size of the building? They had fewer than 2,500 tickets distributed, according to WrestleTix. It was cool. They actually showed when Ospreay came out at the beginning, they did that WWE shot of the wrestler from behind heading to the ring. Because it was a smaller venue, the crowd was small, but they wrapped around the ring, so they didn't have that super dark cutoff point opposite the entrance stage. So they actually took advantage of it well. I thought they shot it well. But how much? Like, be specific. What is it? Just the crowd, the arena size, and the crowd? Probably not. I mean, Kenny doesn't just wrestle at the Tokyo Dome. So what can translate? What are they in control of? Kenny and AEW to bring that there? How should he be? Curated and edited and presented in a way that captures what people universally think is a better version of Kenny overseas.
To me, it wasn't the video, because they showed that shot briefly with Kenny coming out too. And they showed that people were in the top rows of the, whatever that lower level was. And it looked good, but it didn't sound good. Like to me, the audio was like, okay, there's not that many people here. You can just tell. And it really came out during Copeland's time out there, I felt like. But so I don't mean to dodge the question, but it's just nobody shoots wrestling the way New Japan does. They don't worry about filling the seats, and sometimes they may darken the arena, but I always really am compelled by their presentation of top stars like Kenny Omega. And so I'm not good enough architecturally or cinematography wise to really answer that question completely. But again, I felt like this was a good presentation of Kenny, and I'm really glad that they didn't goof around, that they let him come out there and try to be serious, because in the past he's been reluctant to do that. So that's the best answer I could give you. I don't, I think that's kind of a genie in a bottle type thing. Like, if they could capture that and get that magic across somehow, it would make the show more compelling. But it's the whole nature of AEW, and not that New Japan's super hot. The people that go to New Japan are really serious fans, and they're going to eat that stuff up.
And there's just, AEW has done a lot of goofy. Well, I mean, New Japan's done some goofy stuff, but there's a
never in the main events though, Wade.
Yeah.
New Japan keeps Yano off to the side, or whatever you want it to be. They treat the serious stuff super serious. I mean, that entire presentation of Kenny and Gabe Kidd, that's art, man. I mean, it's just,
well, in fairness, this is, Pride did ring entrances amazingly well back in the day. I mean, like, for a big, it's a big, you're going to have a bigger entrance for a big show. But I thought, so I asked the question, but I thought like, as soon as that music hit, and by the way, Zach, I'm sorry, I like, as we're talking about the entrance music, I'm like, I think I read something about it somewhere. It just left my mind. And he actually, in his AEW Feud Tracker, literally said Final Fantasy. I was like proofreading, and it did stick with me what it was. But I remember reading somewhere today about his entrance theme, and so that's why he's especially hard on me. But I like read it earlier, and it still didn't land with me.
Again, to me though, it's like the fact that I didn't know. I mean, I did read that at some point, but I was so impressed with it, and I don't have the bias of being like, oh, this is the cool thing.
Right. Yeah. Anyway, I don't want to dwell on that, but Zach should especially be mad. It's because I literally proofread his column and added the commas. I always add commas to his writing, Zach, where they belong. And I was like, oh wait, he mentioned a bunch of stuff about Kenny, and that was in there, and I just floated out of my head. Anyway, so I think, given the size of the venue and that it wasn't a main event, it was a reintroduction of him, that the aura for Kenny I thought was good. I love the new ring entrance and the new theme. And I said many times, sometimes Kenny showing up on AEW Dynamite looking like he rolled out of bed, went to the gym, and then didn't bother to shower or look at a mirror. And it just felt low rent, like he couldn't be bothered. I'm Kenny Omega, So I don't. Expanding his fan base is the key, not just catering to you, Dan, in people like you and people in the audience who know what the cleaner is a reference to and can talk about its history and the first time it was mentioned by, like, you want to expand your audience and you've got to come across as a star. The presentation has to be there. I thought that the presentation was there tonight as a serious main event star. Now, we'll talk more about Kenny, but I want to add one thing. And we're hard on Jeff Jarrett. I thought had a good week, a good show tonight. We'll get into the pros and cons of him being in the ring with MJF and all that. Sure. But I thought there's a lot younger wrestlers, veterans for that matter, could learn from how he sold MJF while MJF was talking. I thought it was a good follow up on last week. And last week it wasn't like, oh, this is horrible what Jeff Jarrett did. It was like the Pointer Sisters, 51-year-old man coming up with a new nickname, the Cope, and Jarrett with the trope of a tease retirement, but I'm not going to retire. And it felt sort of pre-derivative of John Cena, like trying to steal his thunder, but it's like Jarrett is no John Cena. With all due respect, and Jarrett deserves a lot of respect for a lot of what he's done in this business. All that said, I thought he had a good night. Copeland was better, but that promo, good promo. People, and I think his pride might be hurt. People are making fun of Cope. Some of the pubes line, which everyone just, I think, groaned at, and other stuff, even from Collision on Saturday. He came out and he cut like, hey, I want to let people know who I am, and respect me, man. I've been through a lot. This wasn't the week for that, because this was Kenny's night. We didn't need Edge talking about broken legs and broken necks and wrestling 10 more minutes and coming back. And he said nobody's been through what I've been through to be standing in the ring. Where are the editors in AEW who go, wait a second, we love Cope. Adam's a sweet guy. He's important to us. But this is Kenny's week. We can't have a guy 15 minutes or 20 minutes before Kenny does it doing like stealing his thunder. Jarrett can try to steal Cena's thunder. Whatever. It's sure. A different promotion. But that jumped out to me at the end of the show. I'm like, wait a second, how did that get cleared? And that was, again, maybe not everybody was thinking about it, but I think some people felt it. Like Kenny was sort of doing what Copeland did a half hour earlier, give or take.
Yeah, no, that's fair. I think AEW works backward too often, and they wanted Hobbs to come out and make a save, I guess. And so they did that, but
yep,
that's a really good point. Now, he made his case pretty well. It wasn't
like a bad promo.
No, but it could have been any time. It wasn't a must-see segment either. Yeah,
it's just like, and we talk about like a ref bump is fine now and then, but you shouldn't have 3 out of 4 matches end with a ref bump. Distraction finishes. I mean, they were overdone. There should be like a 3-year moratorium, but you can do them. But when you look at a pay-per-view lineup, you shouldn't do them 3 out of the first 4 matches. AEW has stuff like that happen all the time. You shouldn't be doing, who was talking about this? William Regal, like signature moves that wrestlers in the main event are going to do should not be done by earlier matches, no matter how big of a star, no matter how many times you've done it. There's a time to step back and look at the big picture. And that was just an example. I thought it was frankly egregious, but not like it didn't kill Kenny, but it was such an obvious thing to not let Copeland do this week. No matter how, hurt he was over crowd reactions, people last week on the show making fun of his hair and the some of the weird choices in his wording and all that. This is Kenny's week to talk about what he's been through. Copeland should be doing it a half hour sooner. I don't need to say more about that. I just wanted to get that in because it's part of the, it's part of what I talk about with AEW, that they just kind of aren't detail oriented in ways that I think add up and matter. And I thought that mattered tonight. Again, didn't kill Kenny. Well, no pun intended or reference to South Park, but didn't kill Kenny. But I think it took something away from it.
Yeah, I mean, and they need an editor. That's clear. Yeah. And it's I'd say when we co-host, or when I co-host with you, I should say, that this kind of thing comes up more often than not.
Yeah.
There's usually something that it was like, why did they miss us? Now I was kind of scattered at the beginning of the show, but I think they did cut out the theme song this week, didn't they? Did they open with the Pointer Sisters?
Yeah, no Pointer Sisters this week. Yep.
I mean, they need to just take the L on that one and move on. And that I agreed with everything you and Todd talked about on that. So
I mean, they don't always air their opening theme, so
right. It could be coincidence, but if it's not, so much the better. Right?
Yeah, no, I mean, take the L sometimes. I mean, it's not like it's worthy of criticism. It's not good. It's not a good fit for what AEW should be going for in terms of their vibe. And I think there's a difference between, I think if those two songs were just created like last week by AEW with custom musicians, the Elton John Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting and Pointer Sisters, everyone would go, oh, this Saturday Night's All Right for Fighting makes sense. Sounds like a wrestling theme. Let's go with it. Pointer Sisters. Oh, I don't know if that fits our tone. So it's not about it being old, like, oh, but the Pointer Sisters is came out 8 or 9 years later. It's more new. It's not about music being old. It's about, does it fit the theme? Is it a good song? If it resonates with people who are familiar with Elton John, and it's probably the single song he did that would fit a wrestling show, go with it. It's a no-lose situation. If you don't know who he is, it's not an old song. It's a new song on a wrestling show. The problem with the Pointer Sisters wasn't when it was made, when it was popular, or even how popular it was. It's just tone-wise, it didn't fit. Now, if Tony Khan is like, yeah, my bad. Let's pull it. Let's come up with something else. I mean, people will give him credit for that. When the landmines didn't explode at ringside, it was like, why are you making such a big deal out of it? And it's like he lost credibility with people the way he handled that. You can gain some credibility by just going, my mistake. This is not the same thing, but way back, we went to like an all black theme on PWTorch.com with white letters. Like we did that. And we got bombarded with emails from people going, no, that's like 5 years ago. People were doing that, and you can't do that. It's hard to read. It's passé. It looks cool, but it's not functionally, pleasant. We switched it back like 3 hours later. We just changed all the colors within 3 hours. We're like, okay, we'll take the L on that. It was a bad call. Look cool, but people didn't like it. That happens. It's like we all do that. Sometimes I leave the house wearing clothes that someone says, go back inside and change. And I change. I don't, whatever. I don't know. I don't know if that actually happens, but anyway, Dan, let's stop, pause, and introduce ourselves here.
Sure.
We are the Hoodie Crew tonight. I like it.
Yeah.
You got to pull over. I got the zip up. Missouri. What do I'm sure mine just says Minnesota somewhere on it. Yeah.
There you go.
I just support like local Minnesota shops when I go up north. And so almost all my clothes are bought in Grand Marais, Minnesota. Okay, so this is the Wade Keller Pro Wrestling Post Show for Wednesday, January 8th, 2024. I am Wade Keller, host of the show. I'm the editor, publisher, and founder of the Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter, dating back decades. Like, it started after Jeff Jarrett started wrestling. It's not that old, but not long after he started wrestling, a couple years later. And maybe just a year. Anyway, And I'm the host of this show. I host the regular Pro Wrestling, Wade Keller Pro Wrestling podcast. Yesterday, Jason Powell from ProWrestling.net joined me. That flagship episode is available for free for everybody on our podcast feed. Search Wade Keller in your podcast app, Spotify, Apple Podcasts, whatever iOS or Android app you use. You can stream it directly from our website, the aforementioned PWTorch.com. Also, Jason and I spent pretty much the entire show talking about Raw on Netflix. A big moment for WWE. We did a VIP after show and hit for VIP members and .net members, and we covered a variety of other topics too. But we did a lot of Netflix coverage. I'm kind of excited to not talk about WWE and Netflix anymore after doing 3 podcasts on it that night and yesterday. It was good to talk about, but it's fun having AEW to talk about now. And joining me to talk about AEW Dynamite is Dan Kuester. He is a PWTorch contributor, and a really good week to have him on because you are a close, longtime follower of Japanese wrestling, New Japan, and can definitely speak authoritatively and in an informed way about the centerpiece of the show, which was the return of Kenny Omega. And we've already gotten into that, and we invite more chat room comments and video callers, and we'll check the mailbag if anybody wants to chime in on what they thought of Kenny and how big of a deal they think Kenny can be. I have more questions for you, Dan, about Omega and AEW's use of him coming up. So welcome. I know you're on the road, and we appreciate you setting up in a hotel room to do the show with us.
Yeah, I definitely wanted to do this, and I'm getting ready to go on a cruise, which we're getting weather in Kansas and Missouri, and so we have changed our travel plans, and I'm hitting the road first thing in the morning to get out in front of the weather. But I want to apologize to Sean Radican because he communicated with me about talking about Wrestle Dynasty, which I would have loved to have done, but because of all this travel stuff, I'm prioritizing this show, and hopefully the callers appreciate it or don't mind it too much at least. So, because I would have been really excited about talking about, Wrestle Dynasty. I really, 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 really enjoyed that show.
Yes. Okay. Let's I said I had some follow-up questions for you about Kenny. Is in this answer might be different now or amplified now based on his match this weekend. Talk about his match this weekend, what you saw in Kenny. He said in the promo, so people in the chat commented on this, and he's like, I'm not going to be the same Kenny. And then he said, well, it was focused on like not being about money and fame, and I don't know. He's trying to like say he's got a different purpose. It's sort of that second. It's my second chance. I won't take anything for granted. I still want to be great. So yeah, we can talk about that aspect of his promo, but do it in the context of what happened with Gabe Kidd in that match, and did AEW seem to be sort of hedging a little on talking about that? Like they referred to it, but they didn't embrace it and tout it because it's not part of their, it's not part of their official it's not officially their show, but anything Kenny does should be part of their ecosystem. So I'm complicating this question, but ultimately I want you to get to, from what you've seen of Kenny tonight and in Japan, do you, and in general, what you know about him, what's different about him, and does he seem ready to be a true centerpiece guy that maybe they're going to build their stadium show this summer around a main event with him?
Yeah, so I don't understand all the legalities of the situation with Max and streaming and this and that. I was frustrated Saturday night watching Collision and being like, they're not promoting this show that comes on right after Collision. And apparently Max won't allow them to do that. If they're not allowed to show video of that show, then they need to talk to their corporate partners and say, what the hell are we doing here? Because they didn't do it. They did an almost okay job. I give it like a D+ of how much they captured what happened in the Tokyo Dome and sharing it with their audience. Like, unless they're worried that that show is better than their shows, which maybe it is, but I still think it excites people about watching AEW shows. They way undersold what Kenny did, and his wrestling, his selling. If you're really a partner with New Japan, you could pat Gabe Kidd on the back too, because that to me, had it happened a week earlier, is an easy vote for match of the year. That's how great I thought it was. And I mean,
which is why match of the year voting should like start on January 1st, and just the results should come out later. I don't like matches of the year being in different years, and there's different cutoffs. Like I get with like this is so side topic, but like I get the wrestling magazines back in the day with the 6-week turnaround time, not wanting year-end awards in March or late February. But come on, if in this era, like it should be all the way through December 31st, then voting starts the next day.
Oh, I think it does. I'm not saying I would. I'm just saying it's already probably got my vote for 2025, and it would have my vote for 2024.
Yeah, I guess I'm making a different point than you're making completely.
Yeah, I just but
yeah, good point.
But they should have shared video of that. They should have shared. They didn't even acknowledge Ricochet. Yeah, he lost against Zach, but I mean, he's wrestling for the world title. Like, you can't mention that. Like, I don't know. I mean, it's part of his journey too. So,
yeah, and my point is like they showed some clips of this weekend, and I'm glad that they did. I'm glad that they did that, but it feels like they're sort of building the bridge halfway. Like either like it's not part of your system, ignore it, or really tell us like like. And this, people who watch the show and are super into New Japan, and they're the ardent fans who are, the 2,000, 3,000, 4,000 people going to these shows. A lot of them know this. I just think they're not framing like what a big deal Kenny's return, especially with Kenny. Like, I just want to say this. I think they should have the headline should have been Kenny Omega is back. This weekend, his history before AEW was launched, he became a star in Japan. He wanted his return match to be there. Embrace it. Hang a lantern on it. Don't run from it. Don't hide from it. Don't kind of go halfway. He went back and he, put in a performance of a lifetime. People were worried, will he be the same? And all the buzz. You could do what WWE does. Show headlines from people, different.
I wrote that down in my notes, Wade.
Yeah.
Like, why don't you? It wouldn't be anybody that saw that match is going to rave about it. So why don't you tell the truth? That's the best match that I've seen in years. Like, why are you're giving credit to what I think is your number one star.
Yep.
And yes, this is enough. If they don't drop the ball, like, he's your guy. And even over Ospreay, he's your guy.
Well, if Ospreay could be your guy now, and if Kenny gets hurt or something like that, but Kenny, if it's again, it's sort of like the Jeff Jarrett stuff too. I've only got 1 year left. We don't know how much time Kenny has left. I mean, he said he was a bad patient. He had to go back to the hospital multiple times for weeks at a time and all that. You can kind of play up. I don't know if I'm going to make it another year. I don't know how long I'm going to last, but I am the one, the one thing I'm not going to do is go 80% to make my career longer. I'm not going to go 90% to make my career last longer. I can't be hesitant out there or I won't be me. So I don't know how many matches I have left. It might be years. I hope it is. But when you pay to see me, as I proved in Japan days ago, it's going to be full throttle full on Kenny. And I think I just wish AEW would have celebrated that match, given the buzz about it, and gotten people in America. Because again, I think there's like this concern, especially because there was feedback initially about it, which is, why is he wrestling in Japan before AEW? It makes AEW seem secondary for almost anybody but Kenny. Kenny Omega literally was born in Japan, like the character and the rise to fame. Embrace that. That's part of his brand. He's this international star who was, I used the Pride analogy earlier. People who just watched UFC didn't know that like half of the best fighters in the world were in Pride, and because it wasn't as available and all that. And so you didn't have to be in UFC to be a legendary MMA person during those formative years of MMA. AEW can tell that story to the fans that they're trying to attract, the new people, and say, not explicitly, he's never headlined a WrestleMania, but make it seem like he was doing something equally important and kind of more like exotic and cool. He was like making a name for himself overseas in domed stadium shows, having matches of the year. I just wish they like really, really like didn't hold back and said, we knew Kenny was scheduled this week. We didn't know what he would, who Kenny would be, and tout and testify to how great he is and what a great comeback it was. I think that would have built anticipation and laid the groundwork better for the promo he gave.
Yeah, and I just can't go along with this thought, and I think you're throwing it out as a possibility that they may think this. There's no way that diminishes him. Yeah. That makes him bigger. Like, your WWE guys, none of them can match what they do by design. I mean, I know Nakamura wrestled for Noah this weekend, and apparently it was pretty good. But you're going on one of the 10 biggest shows of the year in the world still, and you're setting the bar above what anybody's done. Mm-hmm. Like, you should celebrate that. Like, you don't have to replicate it. You can just borrow it and use it. You're still going to have a Forbidden Door in London. It's not like you're done with this thing. I just, again, I'm trying to be forgiving about it because they went some of the way.
Yeah, they did.
I'd have went way farther, and I really wish they would have. Kenny did the interview, as you said. He pointed most of this stuff out really well.
Yep.
And then, they didn't run with it enough. And part of it, I think, is this was one night I was hoping Jim Ross would have been on the commentary, because you need somebody that can help sell that better than I don't know if it was the announcers being told not to, but
I'm not assigning blame, because I doubt
it's hard to tell who it is.
I doubt Tony Khan said do it, and Excalibur and Ian refused. I mean, so that's not an option. So I mean, it kind of, the buck stops with Tony. It just, and they have their reasons for different things, and it could be that it didn't cross their mind, or it did, and they had their reasons. I'm just saying, I'm advocating for, when it comes especially to Kenny Omega, don't run from or hedge. Embrace. This is like, I say this on podcasts a lot. Like, Rich Fan will come on and talk about something that was on social media that I'm completely unaware of that's consumed wrestling fans' lives for 3 days. I'm like, assume no knowledge. Sometimes I know, sometimes I don't. We're not like fill people in who are listening to the Everything podcast before you comment on it. Don't assume knowledge with your fans. At AEW, it was 7 years ago. That a lot of this stuff was going on 7-8 years ago. Don't assume knowledge. And frankly, have your ambition to grow beyond the audience that you inherited. A very excited audience 6 years ago. And so, yeah, just tell the Kenny Omega story. They did a lot positive tonight. This isn't, I'm not being negative about it. What I'm saying is lean even more into the things that they did, and don't be shy about it, but don't get trapped thinking, we don't want to repeat stuff everybody knows because the first 10 rows or the first 100 rows in your buildings know it. You want to expand the audience. And that promo setting they should have been so excited about what Kenny did and played up the drama. We didn't know if Kenny would be Kenny anymore. He was. And it was just sort of a passing comment by Kenny in his promo. So that's what I'm getting at. Like, if you're going to be in the Kenny Omega business, go all the way, learn from what you did wrong before, and add some stuff to it. And yeah, because I was a week ago, I was hesitant to say it, but after what he did this weekend, and really after he dressed for the part and looked the part, and I thought was serious Kenny tonight, go in the Kenny Omega business. Like I'm okay. I'm okay with putting off Ospreay for a year.
I am too. And it's not just striking while the iron's hot. I mean, you have to be realistic about what could happen. I'm reading the comment here. I mean, well, they
let me
promote the interview to some degree.
Dan, for the sake of our podcast listeners, which is most people not
yes.
YouTube, let me read the comment. I put them on the screen, but I will get to them, but don't refer to them because then the listeners who aren't on the YouTube side feel left out. And I don't want to be a hypocrite when I talk about AEW doing that. So King of Strong Style said, they should have been hyping Kenny all show, making this interview feel big. I'm starting to think AEW either doesn't know how to do it or care to. It should have been the story of the show. In defense a little bit, Dan. I mean, they did plug that Kenny on the show multiple times.
They usually do. They promoted it at the very beginning really hard, and they did mention it a few times. But again, I agree. I would have done more with it. Yeah. I mean, I want to say they had some clips from the Tokyo Dome, but maybe like 20 seconds or something. I mean,
they showed, a variety of wrestlers.
I would have done, it makes me overkill, 2.5, 3.5 minutes of that. Like, that show was so amazing, and Kenny was so amazing. Like, in the environment looks huge. Like, even though there were only 15,000 people there, you show that, and it makes your guys bigger stars to the TV audience.
I mean, they showed Jack Perry and Willow Nightingale and Sammy Guevara and Takeshita and Omega and the Bucks and Claudio and Mercedes and others too. And, Mercedes like, oh, call me 4 belts Monet. And the Bucks said, we don't know when we'll be back. It might be soon. And we'll bring these IWGP tag belts with us. That's, I guess, fine. It's more than fine, but the story is Kenny, not that Sammy Guevara was overseas. Like, use that, Dan, you're like, do 3 minutes. Well, if you're only going to do a minute, it should be 90%. The story of the night is Kenny Omega. He was gone for a year. He almost died. His career seemed like it was over. He prematurely worked out too hard and made comebacks and had setbacks. Like, that's the story that you really want people to get invested in, not that Claudio was there. It's like, or the.
But I guess why I'm saying 2 or 3 minutes is I think it's nice to show those people being stars, being main eventers and important parts of that show. Like I said, they kind of ignored Ricochet losing to Zach, which I don't know if that's because he lost, because that's stupid. Like, it was the main event of Tokyo Dome. I mean, and that's a big spot. And nobody thinks less of Gabe Kidd because he lost. So I would have had an extended thing, and I would have focused on Kenny, because again, that's the best the Bucks have been presented. I don't know how long either.
Yeah.
They had a really nice match in the 3-way, and they came across as stars. I mean, they get something out of that environment, but it's more than that. I mean, they wrestled really well too. So, I don't mean to spend the entire time talking about Wrestle Dynasty, given this show, but they did good, but they could have done better.
And I don't even. I'm not advocating for them touting how good Wrestle Dynasty was, or like I mean, it makes them bigger stars to show them, hey, we're international stars. And to the uninitiated and newer casual fans who were sampling AEW, that's a positive. But to me, just the most important mission tonight was, I've said it for years, like decide who you're going to be in the business of. If they should be in the Kenny Omega business right now. He's gone for a year. He's refreshed. He seems he's shown he's ready to go. He's not a shell of his former self. He's in great shape. Motivated, taking nothing for granted, and he's not being a goof like he was, or weird. It's like, just see, this. I mean, tonight was a sample of what they should have done the first month of AEW Dynamite, and or multiple times, kind of hit the reset button on him. So, anyway, point made. I want to let people know, if you are a VIP member or Patreon supporter, you can be a video caller. Go to PWTorchVIP.com and go to my TV report on Dynamite. There's a link there in my TV report. Same thing for Raw and SmackDown, where you can become a video caller. You can turn your camera off and just be audio. You don't have to be on camera. Not everybody wants to be. That's totally fine. You can also, if you're a Patreon supporter, go to our Patreon PWTorch VIP page, and I also post the link there. So it's exclusive for our supporters, VIP and Patreon, to be a caller. We invite you to do that. You can also email us, wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. For those of you who listen to us on the podcast side of things, which is a vast majority of you, you can still be in the show, even if you don't watch us live. And you can be part of the show, wadekellerpodcast@gmail.com. So if you watch Dynamite, Raw, or SmackDown, you got thoughts on the show, questions, comments, that's the way to be part of the show, even if you don't watch us live on YouTube, where we go live right afterwards. And finally, join us in the chat. If you are watching us live on YouTube, on the PWTorch channel, the chat room is always active, and it's a really fun addition to the format, having that live feedback as we talk, even if it's just scolding us for not recognizing, Final Fantasy as the theme. And I get told I need to say this more. Please like this show on the YouTube side of things, or in your podcast app, Apple Podcasts or wherever. And if you're watching us on YouTube, comment below. That helps the algorithm and makes YouTube think, people are engaging with our show. And of course, subscribe to our channel. You can set alerts to remind you or to alert you when we are about to go live. A lot of cool things there. I talked about the podcast side of things. And if it's easier, and I know there's a lot of shows that are both on YouTube and podcast, and some I watch on YouTube, most I listen to on my headphones from my phone podcast app. You can subscribe or you can subscribe by searching Wade Keller in your podcast app. Spotify, Apple Podcasts, search Wade Keller. This is our red logo show, the post shows. They're all available on YouTube, but they're all available. All the new ones are available on our podcast feed. The podcast feed includes some flashback shows also that are not on YouTube. And then our blue logo show is our regular podcast, and that features our weekly flagship, pay-per-view previews, interviews, Q&A, media Q&As, other formats too, mailbags. So subscribe to both. They're free. Search Wade Keller. Okay, let's shift to our first video call, our first caller of the day, and that is Greg M. Greg, welcome to the show. What's on your mind about Dynamite tonight?
Oh, I'm doing good, and I will officially be an audio caller.
Yep.
I'd heard. I'm in Kansas City, by the way, Dan. You had mentioned being in Kansas and Missouri, so we definitely got bombarded with snow.
I might hit the poker room after this, Greg.
Oh, so you are in Kansas City right now? Awesome.
I'm in Harris, Kansas City right now.
Oh, nice. I know exactly where you're at. Yeah, it's about within 3 miles of where I live, or where I'm staying right now. Yeah, because I go back and forth. Yeah, this is my home, but usually Wade mentions me as Greg in Waterloo, Iowa, but Kansas City is my home. So we're like probably 3 or 4 miles apart from each other right now. Anyway, let me ask a question as it relates to the promotion of Kenny Omega, because I agree with these points. And, it's one thing we have, I know there's conversations all the time on these channels about how much do you try to do things like WWE. And, the fact is, although WWE gets criticized a lot for its presentation and promotion of things, not everything they do is bad. And one of the things, if a star of Kenny Omega's caliber was returning, it would have been the focus of the show. There would have been best of highlights shown throughout the show, or and also what you mentioned with the social media feedback to the match he just had. And, for example, they would have had an equivalent of a huge WrestleMania match, or the Okada Omega trilogy highlights shown throughout the show. By the way, has there been any mention of the tease for All In Texas that took place at World's End on either of the Dynamites?
I don't think so.
That's interesting.
I mean, they did show the highlights of Kenny giving him the title, and they did show the All In the background. That was last week on Dynamite.
Oh,
So
okay. So they have mentioned it.
That video package, and if you're smart enough to see the All In on the screen, it does kind of subtly tell you something.
Yeah. I will say I think that Omega maybe temporarily forming an alliance with Will Ospreay is much more interesting than just going the predictable route with the Young Bucks and the Elite again. So that was a positive for me because that would have taken me out of Kenny Omega's return if they just brought the Young Bucks back. So at least it's something different in that regard. I was glad about that, but but I think so.
If they never mentioned the Elite again on Dynamite, I'd be okay with it. I mean, I just don't think that's essential and should be the North Star of everything that the Bucks and Kenny do is talking about that stuff. I think it's okay to move on. There's like the Shield was great, but now it's the Bloodline and it's the freaking Raw. It's like it's okay to have a new chapter and not relive that, and it could get in the way of making Kenny a centerpiece star if suddenly he's kind of pulled into a storyline with the Bucks who have been all over the place as characters. And what about Moxley trying to take over the company, and shouldn't Kenny be standing up for that instead of worrying about whatever else? It's just it can muck it up. Like, this should be Kenny wanting to prove he's the best, and it seems like the championship is gonna Kenny's going to be in a hopefully he's in a world title match headlining a pay-per-view this year, and not just special attraction or grudge matches or things about people he was friends with and then now has a rivalry with, and they just sell it on how good the match will be. If you're going to be in the Kenny Omega business at his age and what he showed this weekend and what he showed tonight, frankly, let's actually get in the babyface centerpiece Kenny Omega business. Tried for a year and go from there.
And I don't want to be too hard on the announcers because they had about 45 seconds to get this in. But they alluded to, this is really interesting. Look at Ospreay and Kenny. Are they, he had the chair, obviously, and am I going to hit him with the chair? The whole kind of fake drama there. And the announcers acknowledged it, but they didn't explain it at all. And I'll give them a pass this week because it was at the very end of the show. But I'd like to see more backstory about that rivalry and, why there may be apprehension there and all that. And I don't know if you saw it, but the Bucks, after their match on at Wrestle Dynasty, I don't know if I saw this in their social media or what, but they were like, Kenny's getting ready to wrestle. And I think it was Matt, or I forget which one said that. And the other one's like, oh, yeah, well, let's go to TGI Fridays. We don't have to see that. And it was kind of, obviously in real life they watched it, I'm sure, but it was kind of this whole, we are going our separate ways now, which I agree is appropriate at this time anyway.
Yep. Great point. Greg, what else?
For me, I think I've been of the belief that Darby Allin should be the person to dethrone Moxley. I mean, especially because the story's there. But right now, I just wondered, because Kenny Omega, I think he feels hot right now. Like, he feels, he's a guy who genuinely has been missed by the crowd. And he is, do you just go with Kenny beating Moxley? Or because I don't think it's going to be, I hate saying this name, Cope. I don't think Cope's the guy to dethrone Moxley. So maybe I think you have a decision to make between Moxley and Darby Allin right now. And I think one of those two directions, my sense is those are the best and most logical options of where to go. But I think Omega's in the running now, especially after his return and the match he's just had. And now that he feels fresh being back.
What do you think, Dan?
I've been a fan of Darby, more than some. I've had discussions with certain folks about that, but I agree. I'm wanting to. If you have Kenny and Okada at All In, it's going to be great, no matter what it's for. But it should be for your number one title, and you're hopefully going to get the best out of Okada. We started to see it at World's End, and why would you not promote your top guys in the top match at your WrestleMania? And it's a situation where AEW has, I hate to use this term, but I think they have lost enough credibility relative to where they once were with their fan base. Like, if you're super hot, you could afford to keep Kenny and Okada as your dream match near the top. But I think they need all their focus on their very best thing, and that can get as much attention from wrestling fans as possible. And you can say, by the way, the other guys can't match this, and they can't. and go with it. And if they were a hotter product, maybe that's not as essential as I feel like it is now, because the last, I don't know, year plus of their world title things, Swerve was really good, Danielson was really good, but they haven't had that. I'm putting my flag in the ground, and by gosh, we're the best thing going. And with Kenny Omega, you can easily do that.
I think I'm going to disagree to a degree with what you just proposed. I would be in favor of them not at all in the year 2025 talking about match quality or we're the best wrestle. I think it speaks for itself. I don't think there's
I'm not saying they have to explicitly say it. I'm just
So you reframe it so I kind of understand, because I don't want to.
I think at All In you're going to have Kenny and Okada.
Yeah.
If you have it for the world title and this is the focus of our promotion,
yeah,
you're putting something out there that I don't think WWE can match.
Gotcha.
You don't have to come out and you don't have to beat people over the head with it.
Yeah.
But when your world title is not that, it's a little bit different.
Gotcha.
That's.
So, so I'll make just this point, and it's tangentially related to what you said. What I don't want AEW to do is think that take too much pride in how good Kenny Omega matches can be and the array of opponents that he can have. Okada, Moxley, Ospreay, Okada, whatever. I mean, it's just like it's a good list. Yeah. I mean, he's been God long enough. There's like new names I want to see him again. So, but let it just go without. Let it be self-evident. Like I just think fans are going to know how good the matches are. So what I don't want is for them to think, well, we're the best wrestle, or NWA back in the late 80s, we wrestle, or TNA with their motto. And like at some point, you've got to get people invested in the personalities and the stories and make the championship feel important. Tell a story that people can get invested in. They know the side effect is how good these matches are going to be. But people who are not yet convinced they're going to buy Kenny and Okada are not going to buy it because you tell them this match will be better than anything you'll see anywhere else. It's just that there's a limited audience for that. AEW needs to get people invested in Kenny the person and his journey, like what we learned with Cody. Like Cody doesn't have the best matches. He has really good matches. He's a pro, but it was all about finishing the story to the point that the world rejected Dwayne "The Rock" Johnson because they thought he was taking something away from a story fans got invested in. I just want AEW to, if I didn't think that they would reach for that bag of chips and just eat it till they're full, in terms of we have the best wrestlers and Kenny's great. If I thought they had the discipline to mention it in passing, but not lose sight of what actually is going to expand the audience and sell tickets and sell pay-per-views, then I wouldn't say this. But sometimes I think they just kick back and go, we got the best wrestlers. And they forget it's about telling stories. It's about in every single week telling a story with ups and downs and setbacks and with your top talent. And I want that to be the focus of this year with Kenny. And they need to obviously start doing that with Okada in a main event way too. So just, get out of the business of looking like our badge of honor is how good the matches are. Get people to care more about the wrestlers and the stories.
Yeah, and I don't mean to cut Greg off, but we agree. I'm just saying that right now, your world title stuff is all this convoluted stuff with Moxley, and I don't know. It just to me, it's okay, but it's not going to build your audience very much. And if you get properly hyped matches with Kenny and Okada, Kenny and Takeshita with Dawn, that's still untold.
Yep.
There's so much there. There's meat on the bone. And I don't want this meta stuff on my TV where it's like, oh yeah, it's going to be a 5-star match. Yep. But if you get people know that are buying your pay-per-views that it's going to be pretty great. And there's enough opponents for Kenny that you could just, I don't know. I just think this you're getting a golden opportunity based on the way he returned. And it may be a limited opportunity, and I would go with it.
Yep. All right, Greg, back to you.
Another match, I think, that you could actually, maybe you could even planted the seeds for, maybe even in Grand Slam Australia, considering it's his home country, is Omega and Kyle Fletcher. Because I think they had a match on Dynamite, but this is before Kyle Fletcher really took off and became the noteworthy star that he's become. So you could do that. I mean, that could that could be one of the headline matches in Australia, along with, I think, Mariah May and Toni Storm, which is where I think the direction is. And I agree with Wade in terms of the storytelling and the building of story and not just emphasis on wrestling. But I will say from an in-ring standpoint, I do think Dan is correct about Omega, Okada. You could have All In or Forbidden Door London headlined by Zack Sabre Jr. and Will Ospreay easily if you keep Sabre out of the AEW sphere of influence over the next 8 to 9 months. And then I'd throw in, as far as a women's match you could put on at All In Texas, that I think WWE would have a hard time matching in match quality. That would be Mercedes and Athena. So you could do both in terms of building stories and characters, but also if you do want to go down like that, where the best wrestle showcase for a few of these matches, there still is the chance to do it. But I agree with Wade about the building of emphasis of story and of characters, like where you can find that happy medium. Once again, you don't want it to all just be like the whatever term you use for like WWE storytelling and larger than life characters, but there's always happy mediums for these things, I think.
Yeah, I think you can get the point across that the match is going to be great, and there's a way to say it and say it in one or two sentences every now and then, but it's not the crux of the sales pitch. I don't say run from it. I mean, you can just go, hey, there's a lot of different styles in wrestling and a lot of different style of matches, but there is magic when Omega and Okada get in the ring, and these are matches that people go back and rewatch and study and show to their friends to bring them into wrestling. Like, there's a way to frame it in that way. I just don't want them to displace the historical significance from a what if this were real standpoint. I mean, yes, the NBA will say, when these two teams play, there's an electricity, there's a magic, there's a chemistry that it's so exciting, it's so close. And when these two teams play, the crowd's on their feet and there's such dynamic athleticism. But that's the B story. The A story is it a playoff game? Is it what's the stakes? Does it affect playoff positioning? Is it for the championship? It's two superstars battling for their legacy. It's about that way more. And I just worry that AEW's sort of resting face, for lack of a better term, is to just talk about match quality and think job's done. And they need to work harder to get people invested in the other aspect of it. You can mention it, but it's also just sort of self-evident. People who know and care are going to know. Do the heavy lifting in the other ways. Greg, anything else you want to say?
Yeah, I want to start to switch gears to a few other topics, and I will say that it remains amazing to me that Jeff Jarrett, of all people, in terms of audience reaction and approval, is probably the most probably the best run of his career in terms of just being accepted by the audience. I think he's been he's not always been the most accepted person in terms of how he's been perceived in the various he's been in over the decades, but I do have to say, if you've got Jeff Jarrett teasing potentially getting a title match in 2025, you've also got Cope, there I go again saying that word, headlining the next pay-per-view most likely. People really can't in good faith complain about John Cena getting another potential big title feud in his what's being billed as his retirement tour. So it's fine and all that, but also it is where this is a case of where you are getting a little bit, it is starting to be more and more where WWE was a few years ago with some of these guys in top positions of it's the over 45 crowd and all this. So maybe after these runs, maybe start to tone that down again a little bit, I think, because, I think it's fine to have these guys in these roles, but you don't want to go overkill on that. And that's also where it's going to be interesting to see how Lashley's used in the next couple of years, because he's a guy who could be a top guy, but also there's a lot of uncertainty with how big men are treated in AEW in terms of how they're pushed. So yeah, just a little, maybe not embrace this route too much.
Well, Zach Barber says Double J's winning me over. Dan, I said near the top of the show that I thought Jarrett had a good segment tonight. Last week was just cliched and overly long and self-indulgent and part of a larger issue with AEW that Greg is talking about. That exacerbated an issue, and so the timing was bad. But I thought I don't have a problem with it. An MJF Jeff Jarrett match. MJF's not going to be in the main event every week. Kenny Omega and MJF will happen someday. Hopefully in the next year and a half, and it'll be huge. But Jarrett was good tonight. If you just sort of you stipulate to the fact that this is happening, it's good. He came up short in the Casino Gauntlet. I don't know. I mean, you can be good and still think it shouldn't be getting the TV time it's getting. Like I'm trying to pick my words here. It's like he can point to the segment and go, that worked. Like I thought he was good playing off of MJF. I thought it was a good MJF, by the way, the best MJF. He wasn't crass. He was brass, but he wasn't doing shock jock humor, the stuff that's beneath him, the low hanging fruit. He didn't do local. You didn't butcher or effectively pick on local sports teams, or, it's like it was just being a jerk to a legend. And so I thought this segment in a vacuum was good, but I'm not retracting the overall critique that I'm just not sure that AEW is going to get out of their the rut that they're in certain ways by having people tune in and watch significant time of Jeff Jarrett on a farewell tour that by all, I mean, I don't know if there's many people. How many people think Jeff Jarrett's a bigger deal than John Cena? And it's like, I don't know if, I think John Cena would blush at the TV time Jeff Jarrett got the last 2 weeks. So Dan, what do you think?
Yeah. It helped being in Tennessee. I think that is, and Jarrett referenced that, and the crowd likes that. So that helped. They had a good back and forth with MJF. And I'm not sure Jeff Jarrett ever gets a world title shot in this whole thing. Nor am I sure that he should. If he does and it's a TV match, sure, fine, I guess. There's too much of an emphasis on older guys in AEW in general. If you had to say, should we have more old guys or less? I think the answer to that question is fairly obvious. But as you said, you do want to individually evaluate these things. And I was pretty compelled. It wouldn't crush me if Jeff Jarrett did just kind of decide to sell out and help MJF somehow. And then MJF tried to help him win the world title and he failed. And, I was always kind of I was kind of out for myself at times in my career. I mean, it doesn't have to be the hero story.
Yeah.
I'd be okay with it. I was kind of like, this is a pretty good offer by MJF. He should probably take it. That's kayfabe Dan watching the show thought that, but it was a good segment. It might have went a hair long, but not bad. And I do think Greg might be onto something, by the way, about the Fletcher. Fletcher might be wrestling Kenny in Australia. That makes a lot of sense, and the fact that they have Kenny going up against Brian Cage next week might be moving in that direction.
Couple comments, Greg, before I go back to you in the chat. Darrell says, I did not like that Jeff thing with MJF. Like, first, it feels like you're trying to piggyback on Cena. Second, how did MJF find out about that contract, and why is that not a problem? I didn't get hung up on MJF having inside information. I believe that MJF has some mole in the office who would tell him.
It happens in real sports all the time.
Yeah.
And if anybody was going to be a weasel that way, it's MJF.
Yeah, that part didn't bother me. Piggybacking on Cena, then sort of making fun of, just deadpan saying, how dare Jeff Jarrett, steal John Cena's thunder. But anyway, so as King of Strong Style says, if any other promotion was pushing Jeff Jarrett, people would hate it. I just think it's a waste of time. He's never been pushed as anything in AEW. Now he's going to be world champ.
No, he's not.
No, he's not going to be world champ. And as Joshua White points out, roughly 0 people think he's going to be champion. If him saying he wants to, take a final stab at the title is a means to another chapter that comes quickly in this, that's fine maybe, but you don't want to be in the business of selling the notion with a straight face that with this roster that Jeff Jarrett is the top 10 or top 20 guy who can win the world title. That feels delusional and bad for business, and frankly kind of embarrassing for Jeff Jarrett. This isn't like TNA with 3 other good wrestlers who have any name value. Like, this is freaking AEW with this loaded roster. with people who are underutilized. The fact that he's finding a way to even spend 2 weeks talking about the world title is frankly ridiculous, like in a kayfabe sense. So it shouldn't last long. But if it's this quick little story arc to get to something else, then, we can criticize it or people can plug their nose or roll their eyes, but it'll be over with quickly. We don't want to be telling the story 2 months from now, Dan.
Yeah, and at least people are focusing on the world title, because so often in AEW, a lot of these people have ignored the world title. So I'll take it. They're doing a better job of addressing what has been a problem for them historically, I would argue.
If the idea of the announcers, the announcers aren't going to bury him and go, come on, Jeff, that's you get over be realistic. You're not going to be world champ. So there's the challenge of how do you frame somebody in their late 50s who's nowhere near good enough in a kind of, storyline way to beat the top 5-10 people in AEW. If you start telling that story and giving it a ton of TV time, I just think in a meta and in a non-meta sense makes the company look a little off track. You're right in saying everybody should, not everybody, but more people should be talking about the world title. It's just, I don't know. I wish there was some skeptical voice on the announce team just going, Jeff, we love you, but maybe the world title isn't for you. It's a tough spot they put themselves in by even
someone in the chat suggested the ROH title, and
yeah,
that's not terrible. I mean, I don't, fine. That would be okay.
That'd be,
What was the deal with the announcers tonight? Why was there no Tony? Do you have any idea?
I think he has a bad cold. I don't think he has. Okay. It was Ian Riccaboni and Matt Menard and Excalibur.
I felt like it was just too much of the same voice.
Oh yeah, I don't think
really didn't work for me.
I agree. Yeah, at times I was like, is that Menard or Ian? And then Ian's a play-by-play guy, and I don't know. I mean, it's a two-man booth is fine.
No one individually was terrible, but it just like there was when MVP was on there, I'm like, oh, good, somebody's mixing up they're mixing it up a little bit.
Well, what was Excalibur scolded Ian Riccaboni at one point? He goes, well, that's not really the point we're trying to make here, like early in the show. And then Ian had to eat crow a little bit or something. It felt a little. I felt slightly uncomfortable for a second with Excalibur scolding Ian for making a point that wasn't the main point that they were getting at. But anyway, okay, Greg, back to you. Anything else you want to bring up before we move on?
Yeah, I have a few observations and one question, and then I will drop off after this. But I guess I will follow up on the Jeff Jarrett thing. It's amazing that we're even talking about Jeff Jarrett like this in 2025, because he has not always been the most well-received by the fans wrestler over the course of his career. So it is a testament to how good he's been in this run he's had. Like his work with Hangman Page was really good, and now this. So credit and props to Jarrett for getting people invested in him like this in the run at this point of his career. So I don't want to take away from that. And then a couple more thoughts. I think you've got your top matches for Grand Slam Australia, the aforementioned. I think Omega Fletcher and Mariah May Tony Storm. I think those two matches will the home country people in big matches, and then you could also. Speaking of which, there's another guy in his home country who I think they made pretty clear that Malachi Black is likely not to be appearing on AEW television again, based on the post-match promo with Will Ospreay and Buddy Matthews, with Ospreay telling Buddy and Brody, you don't have to be out there just like this. So I think, and so there's a place, maybe, I don't know, maybe Buddy Matthews gets figured into this as well in terms of Australia and having a big match on that show. And then my other observation before I go to the question I was going to ask the two of you is, oh man, I'm losing my train of thought. I'll just go to the question. What do you guys think of the potential likelihood of Bobby Lashley challenging for the tag team titles? That's an interesting position for him to be in. Oh, my other observation was I was glad to see. I liked Will Hobbs winning the Gauntlet Battle Royal, Casino Gauntlet. Although I will say with him, he's not winning next week, so the emphasis will be on the follow up with him. How do you follow this up? Because he had a sleeper, really good match with Takeshita at the pay-per-view, and then this match is a big opportunity. So it's about the follow-up with a guy like Hobbs. And once again, AEW's track record with quote unquote big men has not been the greatest. So, and my final question, I'll drop off, is what do you guys think of like Lashley and Shelton Benjamin? Based on the promo work and the fact that Private Party ran them off after Lashley's match with Mark Briscoe, going for the tag team titles. What do you think of that? And I will sign off with that.
Great. Thanks, Greg. Good topics. Thanks for your contribution. Yeah, Dan, Private Party celebrating, and then MVP Lashley and Shelton walking in, and predictably, I think, Lashley's going, these tag titles are going to be ours. They should be theirs. I think Shelton and Lashley winning tag belts works for where they are right now. What do you think?
Yeah, I completely agree. It was kind of weird. Like, Private Party was supposed to be interviewed, and there never really was much of an interview. Like, then they just kind of walked off after the Hurt Syndicate made fun of them or whatever. So that from a logic standpoint, I'm not sure that quite added up, but they got where they were trying to go there. And as far as Will Hobbs goes, yeah, he's probably not. I don't see him winning the world title next week, but that's like, if you're hurt by losing for the world title and you're somebody at his level, then you shouldn't be in wrestling. I mean, I think there's a lot of opportunity there to make him seem like a bigger deal in the aftermath of that match. I think the thing he said about Moxley, I think Moxley has been a fan of his, a supporter of his for a long time. I've seen and heard other references to that, and I think that Moxley will work hard to make that a good night for Will Hobbs. And so, as Greg said, the follow-up will matter, but you can't be afraid to put some of your top guys in world title matches and have them lose. If you are, then you're not doing a good job booking your show. So I think it's a good step for Hobbs. It's kind of a natural progression to get a world title shot, and probably put in a good effort and fall a little short.
Yeah, just use it to tell a story afterwards, or the match plays out in a certain way where he earns, it's like what they did with Buddy Murphy and Ospreay going, hey, I respect you, this was a tough battle, and let's be friends. Like, Hobbs could earn Moxley's respect and join the Death Riders, or Hobbs could have a setback and that drives him in a different way, that they do follow up on it. And it shouldn't just be hey, they went 18 minutes and Hobbs didn't get injured this time and he put up a good fight. I mean, that's every story AW tells in the ring. Not every, but almost.
They tell it way too often, which diminishes the power of doing it.
Yeah, almost every story is we know who's going to win, and it's a long, good match. And boy, that person who lost put up a good fight, even though you never thought they were going to win. That's what Hobbs and Moxley are doing, Dad. It's who's going to win, and they're going to have a good match. There's got to be that next thing that AEW's got to add, which is, what does this loss mean? And they did it with Buddy Murphy, with Ospreay. Like, oh, they lost, put up a good fight. Ospreay says respect. Whatever. I mean, like, so even you want to make a match where people know what the outcome's going to be, and they just see it as inevitable. You want to have something that match propels going forward, other than leaning back and going, hey, we had a good 15-minute match on TV.
I might lean more toward it setting Hobbs and some teammates up to win the trios titles or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
They kind of forget about those anyway, and that Moxley even on that team, just because Hobbs has turned so frequently. I don't know that another turn to join the Death Riders when he just came back and said, "I'm Don Callis treated me badly."
Right.
I don't want a Lex Luger career path for Mr. Hobbs.
Yeah, that's very good point. Sadler version 3 says, I think Hurt Syndicate would be better champs, but what an underwhelming run it'd be for Private Party to have that huge moment just to be transitional champs. The thing too with Hurt Syndicate is, yeah, they're cool and they're, big stars, are 50-ish. But are they like heels or faces? Because they're heels because of how they come across and act and what they do with Private Party. But week to week, the job of a heel is to get your babyface opponents over, not to get yourself over. That's just sort of a rule that you need to make. There can be exceptions, but it's a selective exception for a purpose. And I don't think MVP gets that. It's like, hey, we're in Chicago. Let's talk about your sports heroes. You get a pop. And, Lashley and Shelton are the coolest guys on this company in the way they dress and carry themselves. Like, it's like recalibrate, figure out how you're going to show ass, as the term is. Like, you can't just be the coolest guys in the room acting like heels, but thinking you're succeeding if you've got 40 to 80% of the crowd cheering you. That's not doing your job. You're undercut. Your job is to get Private Party over, even if you're going to beat them. And I just don't see them doing that. I don't get. Do they get what their job is? Does Tony Khan know what the job of
that
heels?
wasn't a great segment for Private Party. They look kind of foolish.
But that's part of a pattern with Hurt Syndicate. Sadler Vision 3 says Hurt Syndicate are a great presentation, but awful heels. Even in WWE, they'd slap hands with fans during entrances. Like, I mean, I don't know if they fundamentally understand what their role is. It's not to be cool heels who get over and get cheered at the expense of baby faces. That's being a jerk. You're not being a good member of the roster. You're undercutting your opponents. So it's better to be over as heels than not if you're those heels. But if you're Tony Khan, it's terrible for your baby faces. That's why, the whole Moxley thing of him being a heel who's saying things people nodding along to going, that doesn't sound like a bad thing. I wish he didn't try to suffocate people. I was groaned when he saw the plastic bag again this week. My God. Get rid of the Pointer Sisters. Let's get rid of plastic bags too. Mm-hmm. But, your job is as a heel. Number one job is make sure your babyface opponent, who's at your level, is more over when you're done with them than when it started. And that doesn't seem to have ever crossed MVP's mind or Lashley and Shelton's mind.
Yeah. Maybe maybe it's just Private Party is not there.
Right. Well,
and maybe it's a situation where they get the belts and then they really do show ass for somebody that beats them down the road. So I don't want to rule that out. And I'll say this, I was a little surprised that Lashley handled Briscoe quite as easily as he did, but I'm not going to complain about it when we sit there and say that all these other matches are not, they're too back and forth.
Yeah.
If that's your guy, that's who you're going to go with. It's fine to have, he got 75% of the match. Probably it wasn't like Briscoe looked inept.
Right.
But for somebody winning, it was a more one-sided victory than you're used to seeing on AEW.
Yeah. All right, let's bring Root Dog into the conversation. Our next video caller. Root Dog, welcome. He's got his Kenny shirt on. Perfect.
Okay.
You asked me to wear a shirt, a wrestling shirt, so I'm wearing one. So here you go.
You sound despondent over fulfilling that request.
No, I'm not despondent whatsoever.
All right, good. Yeah. So what's going on? What's up?
Well, I almost feel like I have to touch on that a little bit, even though.
Oh, go yeah. Add your 2 cents.
We talked a bit about it. So Kenny and Ospreay, how big of a deal can this end up down the line?
I mean, in a way, Dan, it kind of helps that Kenny was gone for a while Ospreay sort of got introduced.
Right.
And now, these two people, Kenny, who, at times was the top guy for 5 years and then, or better part of 4 years or whatever. And then, he had a lot of injury last, then Ospreay is like the new shiny toy, established top star. I mean, of course, it feels like two people crossing paths who haven't before. That's cool. I mean, but this is the very, 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 very beginning of making people care. If AEW thinks we just have to put these two in the ring and have them stare at each other, and now we've got the match sold, it's like you're just starting to write your novel with those two as the main characters. You're not in the final chapter. But yeah, if you write the right novel, if you tell the right story, Root Dog, this can be a huge match, Dan.
Absolutely. And nothing wrong with a slow build here. I wouldn't, there's plenty for both these guys to do at the moment, and to have a little intrigue about whether they will, coexist, obviously, but be able to maybe potentially team, help each other out a little bit. I couldn't remember Kota Ibushi's contract status when Kenny's getting beat up. I'm like, who's going to help him?
Yeah.
Could they? And I wouldn't have. I would build to, if they're going to bring Ibushi in, which I don't know if they will. I would build to that anyway. But I was thinking, I thought Ibushi, and then I thought, okay, maybe Ospreay will help him, and he did. And so that's very logical. They have common enemies, and they both have no real reason to be in opposition to each other at the moment. So I liked what they did tonight.
All right, Root Dog.
Yeah, I enjoyed it. I just almost I felt like there could have been another switch they could have turned, between Omega and Ospreay. Like we know we have, Ospreay came and helped him I mean, he really didn't know him anything. So it's like, I don't know. I was like waiting for like a reason for that to happen. That's it.
Well, I mean, Ospreay doesn't care for the Don Callis family, and he's a babyface.
Yeah.
To me, that's enough reason.
Yeah,
Okay.
I mean, Ospreay's a good guy. Kenny is a good guy. Kenny's back from injury. His mortal enemy Don Callis was trying to screw with Kenny and hurt him and set him back and maybe end his career. And he happened to be in back and he made the save. But just because they share a common enemy doesn't mean that they're best of friends. And there's some tension there, which was alluded to, referred to, but not, part of canon. Which AEW has to be careful. They just the same thing with Okada. Like, I mean, there's going to be a group who in their echo chamber who go, Okada Kenny, it writes itself. You don't need to do anything. Just put the match on pay-per-view. We'll be there. You'll be there. But what about everybody else? You got to tell your story. And that's what same with Ospreay and Kenny. Like, you can allude to it, but when you allude to stuff like that, it just, again, they did. I mean, like Seth and CM Punk. I mean, like Michael Cole on Netflix Monday. He's explaining. It took 30 seconds, but he's explaining what the backstory for both guys is, why they have the perspective they have, why Seth resents Punk, and they've, the wrestlers have talked about that too. So there's a way you can fill it in without like doing a mini documentary on the show. I'm not an advocate for, just stopping everything and going, all right, now let's do a 10-minute exposition explaining this, but make sure you weave it in. If you're going to refer to it, you got to assume limited to no knowledge among the people who are going to grow your audience and get your ticket sales back up to 6, 8, 9,000. Bring those people in by not making them feel left out, because there's all these things that get alluded to that they don't know about. So Ospreay and Kenny is a story that has some backstory. Tell that backstory. You're introducing a whole new audience to it and trying to keep people from feeling lost or disengaged or left out. It's the same thing we talk about all the time. I mean, it's broken record, but yeah, go ahead, Rita.
All right. Well, I want to talk about something different, just to be different. What do you think about the Casino Gauntlet match? The format, how it's set up. Like, to me, when I was watching it, it just seems like, wow, this is a whole lot of people that are getting wasted on the roster. And that's not a good feeling.
So we complain, not like literally us three, but the complaint about AEW is they have these matches with stakes, and there's like one or two guys who are good, and then a bunch of people who are almost never on Dynamite filling it out. I like this Casino Gauntlet because it was a bunch of top guys. I feel that way with the Continental Classic. Like, explain why top guys aren't in it. Like, say everybody's invited, but some people choose not to be in it, and explain why. Or say there's a lottery, or say that it's a committee that selects, a third is established top guys, a third are veterans on their, who are late in their career. It's a chance for them, and a third are young guys who have never main evented. Like, just have a format and explain it. I want more explanation. I like that level of granular detail on why certain people are in matches and tournaments and who aren't. This felt like a big deal because it felt like anybody in that. Kyle O'Reilly.
Almost anybody.
Yeah. I mean, Kyle O'Reilly, it's not time for his story to be told. I don't know if it will ever be his time for his story to be told again as a main event guy. But yeah, Rudog, you're not wrong. There were a lot of people there, but they didn't waste matches. I mean, that was just exchanges for a few minutes here and there. I thought it made Hobbs's win more surprising and more effective. Dan.
Absolutely. I was at the show in Nashville where they had one of these things that Darby won, and it was, I think Hangman was in there too, and just, I don't want to say jobbers, but it was lower card guys.
Yep.
And it was like, and my nephew was like, why are we staying to watch this? This is ridiculous. I was like, I kind of want to see if Darby wins, even though most of these people are not going to win. Whereas I wrote this was exactly in my notes. I was very refreshed by, if you go from start to bottom, Jay White, Hangman Page, Wheeler Yuta, Ricochet, not Swerve, Adam Cole, Danny Garcia, who did something dumb I wrote in my notes. I don't know what he did, but I didn't like that. That spot in the corner, I hated it, where he's punching all those guys. That was my notes. Powerhouse Hobbs, Roderick Strong, Lance Archer, Ricochet, Kyle O'Reilly, and Jeff Jarrett. That's a pretty good cross section of guys where there's 4 or 5 guys you could easily say could win this thing. and it would be a compelling match next week for TV with Moxley. So I don't think they were wasted. I think it's like you get these multiplier effects or these external benefits that build off of each other, kind of these halo effects. I think if you talk about heuristics, once you keep adding big names to the match, it makes the other people that go in feel more important. I thought they did I really liked what they did with that match from that regard.
Brewdog, your thoughts on what we had to say?
No, I mean, to me, I was just like seeing other people that I thought could have been like a top star in AEW, like Adam Cole and other people, but it was just like, this is kind of cringy. Like it didn't hit for me whatsoever. And I've never really understood. I think the gimmick is like pretty crappy. Like
it's a made for TV match. It's not logical. There's no good reason that should decide who gets a title shot. The luck of the draw, and if you're in the match, early, it gives you an advantage. It's sort of the opposite of the Royal Rumble, where being the first draw is a negative because you don't have to wait for everybody to enter. If you just get a chance to win, if you win quickly, then other people don't get a chance to come out. You could argue, Dan, it's convoluted. Like it takes a little more effort to understand than most matches. It's not self-evident. There's a level of counterintuitiveness given how used to people are to wanting number 30, not number 1 in the Royal Rumble over the decades. So that works against it. But to me, there's enough logic to it. There's a certain luck of the draw, but it's not guaranteed, as Hobbs showed, that if you're the first one in, that means by the time if you don't win quickly, you're more tired, and then other people get in. It's sort of like a line change in hockey. Like, I mean, if you're on the ice and for a power play and you're a defender, you want to get off the ice after a minute, let somebody else in because you're exhausted. So I think, there's stories to be told with this, which is if you're early in the match, you better win quickly because other people are coming to the ring fresh. And so if you don't win quickly, the advantage turns into a disadvantage. And I just honestly, most of the time with AEW announcers, I think they could just do a massively better job in almost every way other than reciting facts about, history, telling stories and engaging people. And I just, so part of, I think where Rude Dog's coming from, Dan, is this, I don't think they get about halfway into tapping into the intrigue of the format, and then they just sort of stop and move on.
Yeah, a few points I want to make about this. One thing I liked, and I forget which announcer it was, they said, Jay White is built for this because he wants to win quickly, but his stamina is great, and they think he can last. Yep. I really like that. That was a good sports-like comment, and it helped build Jay White, which I'm always for. I guess one thing I would like to see is, once these matches are over, just flash on the screen, here were the next 6 guys that were going to enter the match.
Yeah.
Here was the draw, and we didn't get that far. We finished, these things can end. And maybe
show the people in the back disappointed.
Yeah.
Yep. Here's how
maybe
fits.
Maybe at one point end it with the 4th guy, and somebody, make it unpredictable. But it is a little convoluted, but I've kind of gotten used to it. And like I said, I like the execution tonight. I like the star power. And again, we were at that one in Nashville, and they kept bringing in guys that were we'd barely heard of, and I was like, and it went on and on and on in Nashville too. I think it was 35 minutes because they wanted to make a whole rampage out of it or something. And like I said, my nephew's still probably mad at me for making him stay through the match.
Yeah,
that's funny.
Having 2 people start the match and just have it be lopsided, like the luck of the draw, it's just lopsided. You've got a top guy against a weak guy. I'm not even going to pick on anybody, but in just within 20 seconds, there's just a submission or a power slam or a whatever, a hidden blade. It's over. And then you cut to the back and there's 18 guys just what? That would get the gimmick over. Yeah. Anyway, what else we're done?
All right. Well, this is a funny one. Did you hear Ian Riccaboni's freestyle rap he did for Willow Nightingale?
Oh, Ian. Dan?
I did. I'm not equipped to judge on any sort of a scale, but it was all right. I guess.
He had his moment. How do you feel about Ian's announcing in different contexts, Dan? What do you think our strengths and weaknesses, and how do you do tonight?
Like I said, he's too similar to Excalibur, and Menard's not different enough. So I didn't think it was a particularly effective team.
Yeah.
They need a Nigel in there, or a Taz, or somebody that I think that would it didn't work very well together. I like Ian, with Caprice reasonably well. So I'm not gonna, but Ian and Excalibur and Menard, it didn't do it for me. I was like, where's Tony? And again, just because they don't bring JR out very much anymore, but I think he still has the most gravitas to help tell the Kenny story. And I was kind of like missing him a little bit tonight. And I guess I'm constantly not like the number one Excalibur fan when I'm on these post shows. I don't dislike him, but I think their current announce team is good, but they miss a little something at times.
Yeah, it's just something not there that I think is important for a lead announcer to have. But I mean, it's not like people are just like, oh, I mean, some people are, Excalibur, like I can't stand the guy, or he's horrible. It's just there's just something that's not quite there. Sometimes, like within wrestlers, you're like, God, it looks like they should be a top star, but there's just something that's not quite there. And with Excalibur, I would like to have some traits in my lead announcer on the A show that he lacks, and I think it hurts.
I mean, to me, and I know the New Japan commentary had some problems this weekend, but Walker Stewart, it may be partially environment, but I think he does a better job. And he's 23, 24 years old. I mean, so it's out there.
Yeah. All right, Rude Dog, what else?
Well, the only other question is, I'm not sure how much you know about the ratings for AEW on Max for the last week. I did not hear that. If you had any numbers,
I haven't seen anything released on that. I don't expect it's huge. I mean, I ran a Twitter poll on our PWTorch account, and it sounded like a very high percentage of people, even if they had TBS, were going to watch on Max just because of better picture or who knows what. It would extrapolate to a massive increase in audience, and based on the Twitter poll, and I think it is not representative. But we have to work on anecdotal indicators right now. But Max is not Netflix. I mean, it's sad to say HBO should have had a head start that no one ever caught up with them, but they've been mismanaged, and Netflix has been brilliantly managed. And Netflix is way, way, way ahead internationally and domestically. So it's a good partner to have. It's nice as an option. They're absolutely reaching tens of thousands of more fans, but they haven't sent out a bragging press release. I guess they have more shame than to just blatantly lie. So if the numbers were amazingly good, I don't see what would hold them back from bragging. They've sent out press releases before, framing things in ways that I picked apart. I mean, like they talked, there's been things, and I've written it up, where they haven't done a lot of press releases, but there was one in particular where it was just very intellectually dishonest how they were framing like the increase in viewership, not accounting for the fact that they had added Collision or something like that. And so I just want a straightforward press release. If you got something to brag about, go, hey, we increased our audience 22% over the prior quarter average with the addition of Max. So like something, but they haven't done that.
Do they even have access to those numbers though? I mean, it's very confusing as to what the streamers pay for and what they're willing to get from Nielsen. I'll say this from personal experience. I'm on YouTube TV. I've been a Max subscriber. I got it for like the last season of Curb Your Enthusiasm, and now they're going to have some AEW content. I've just kept it. And YouTube TV kind of pushed me to Max, like when I watched last week. So I watched on Max, and I was like, this is a better picture. And now,
but you can't rewind. You can't fast forward and rewind. At least not last week. You couldn't.
Okay. Yeah. That's interesting.
Yeah. Netflix was great. It didn't work for me. Max didn't work for me. I'll recheck it out on the live feed, but I just stuck with my DirecTV stream this week on TBS.
Yeah. I'd have to think back about that, because I'm sure I didn't. I always rewind a little bit.
Yeah.
I may have watched it after the fact last week.
Then it's fine. Yeah, then it's different. Yeah.
Yeah. So anyway, but it's a good picture. They've done something from that regard that's an improvement.
Yeah. All right, Brewdog. What else?
Oh, that's all for me today. So Thank you, Wade, and thank you, Dan. Pleasure.
Thanks, Brewdog. Great seeing you.
Right.
Thanks. Have a good week. Want to give a shout out to everybody affected by those fires in LA too. I know it's just like I haven't been glued to the news because I'm had tons of stuff going on. But man, I mean, I know there's people who are being affected, and I'm not going to get into personal stories. It's for them to say, but people who are contributors who are like helping their families, evacuate or get safe or at least pack up just in case, and that kind of thing. And yeah, it's so stay safe, everybody. All right. I want to go to an email from JB from. Oh, you know what I was gonna say? I know I was gonna say something else, Dan. You have HBO Max now. Industry is on Max, I think, and that's a show that, as an econ professor, you might like. It's about like a high stakes trading firm for rich people, and it's about it's about kids fresh out of college, interacting with old codgers on a trading floor, and it's there's a bunch of sex and
I took my students to the Mercantile Exchange in Chicago, and that was just a year ago, which it used to be completely the old trading places buy sell stuff, and now it's almost completely electronic. Really interesting to see. And then you still have a few of those old guys that are in their fancy outfits that show up and do it in person, and they think there's an advantage to that. But so it's I might check that out. I had someone suggest Bookie to me, which I guess is a Max program as well. So I need I need to take advantage of my subscription. So I'll try to check that out.
Yeah, it's a cool setting. It's based in London, but it's people from New York who got jobs at Pierpoint, a London investment banking firm, and
very different from Succession. But I miss our Succession conversations. Because,
yes. Well, people who like Succession were like, this is a good follow up to it.
I'll check it out. That's awesome.
Yep. And
that's another reason I had Max. I've had it forever. I mean, it's that or Curb Your Enthusiasm, and then I'll throw a Sopranos episode on every so often, and I have reason to enjoy Max. And now I have more. I mean, I was watching the first Double or Nothing a little bit the other day just because I was poking around what was on Max. So
yeah, Eric, one of the kind of the veterans of the bank. He's like a surprisingly, like, at first you're like, feels kind of one-dimensional. He's going to be a side player, and he turns out to be really compelling as you get into the whole season one, but season one's really, really compelling. Season two was sort of like, okay, good, I'm just going to stick with the show. And then season three, it was like, we're off to the races. Like they just blew things up, and it's fun. It's a tangled web.
All right. Stuff, I need a show. That's great. I'll check it out.
All right, cool. So back to the email I was going to read here for JB from Detroit. Is Ospreay telling Buddy Matthews that he and Brody King don't need to follow a leader, setting up a feud between Ospreay and Malachi Black? I did see a Fight for rumor that Black is finishing up with AEW, but I felt like I've heard that for years now. Yeah, I mean, I've heard some stuff on background on Malachi, and ultimately my conclusion is it's kind of mucky in terms of what his future is in AEW. Like there's some pushback on the idea that he's completely disengaged from AEW and doesn't want to be there. I've had some credible people say, no, that's it. Like, that's not really what's going on. So I say that because I want to get, if I'm going to report something, I want to gather my thoughts and review my notes and stuff. But I don't know that I don't think it's like a given that he's gone, but and that this was writing him off. It came across to me as if that's what they were doing, though, because he wasn't mentioned. The announcers didn't go, "Ooh, what is Malachi going to think about this?" It was sort of like, yeah, there's these two guys, and now Ospreay is just kind of reframing them for us in the absence of Malachi. So most likely that was writing him off. But there's some, just in the last few weeks, communicating with some people in AEW are like, well, there's a little bit more to it than has gotten out there. So I don't know. I mean, I think Buddy Matthews is underutilized. I wish he'd stop gaining more muscle. It's such useless muscle. He doesn't I think it makes him look shorter, and he's gonna get injured again, and he's looked better in WWE than he does now. But I know that hurts to hear because he's obviously putting in a ton of gym time. But I don't think it helps him overall. It's just not my opinion. But he and Brody King are a good tag team, and I would like to just see them get a consistent push in the tag division. And if they're baby faces who are going to go, if this was to set up, Brody and Matthews as baby faces going after Shelton and Lashley after they win the tag belts, that's a logical conclusion to draw. AEW doesn't always reward logic in terms of, inferring things from what we see on TV, but that seemed to be maybe what they were doing. Dan, what do you think?
Sure. And if they do, I don't mean to be bad to anybody, but they've been this three-way with Private Party, Top Flight, and Leo Rush and Action Andretti. They all have, not bad matches and everything, but I think if you go to that as your main tag team title program, you're getting at least a step up in star power, and probably in audience engagement. So it makes sense to me. House of Black, I've tuned those interviews out for so long, and they've had so many start and stop pushes. I hope there's a conclusion. Like, I hope there's clarity about where they are or are not. I'll say that, because it's been a lot of mostly wasted TV time, in my opinion.
Yeah. JBS, from that same segment, Will Ospreay telling Buddy that he and Brody can do it alone and then forming a pure tag team while Malachi moves into a singles role, if he's staying with the company, is a path I like. I like that better than the current version of House of Black. It improves the tag division and adds another potentially high-profile heel or face to the men's singles division. Yeah, if Malachi's still around, I'd be fine. I mean, you keep bringing up trios titles, and I cringe because I just want Tony Khan to forget they exist, Dan. I don't want any more TV time spent on the world.
Because ever since the Death Riders won them, I think they've barely been addressed or mentioned. So there you go. I mean, to me, you've got a Collision show that, like, even if you featured them on there more and kept them off Dynamite, I mean, there are things that I think could be better done to make Collision more compelling. Anyway, so I love, you and I both kind of started on the Freebirds and the Von Erich, so I guess I have a little bit of a soft spot for the 6-man stuff.
Yeah, but World Class didn't have, all the titles. But yeah. And you know what? If AEW gets,
it was a focus of the promotion. To be fair, it was like right up there behind the NWA World Title. It might have been the second most important.
To me, it was the most important because the NWA title wasn't full time and the 6-man titles were. But if AEW gets the reincarnation or the next version of the Von Erichs and the Freebirds, then by all means. But they don't. One of several things I liked about the Continental Classic is it sets up future matches that make sense. Ospreay and Matthews made sense because of the Ospreay King match, which they discussed and showed a clip of, which I liked. I liked that they did that. Lashley Briscoe made sense because of the stare down they had in the C2. I credit to AEW for taking a match that felt random.
Beat Sheldon in the C2? I forget. I may be mistaken on that, but I feel like
I'd have to Zach nod. Yes, Zach is so Zach is nodding yes in the waiting room.
Oh, good. I was hoping he wasn't nodding no. Like, what's Kuester talking about this time? So good.
No, that'd be shake your head. I think nod, shake your head.
Okay, good.
Zach Barber's waiting for us. We'll get to him. He said, "Is Shivani getting the week off?" Relating to Chris Charlton in the tweet he put out. I don't know. I don't think so. But somebody just said that Tony was under the weather, and but maybe he'd have been there if not for that. I don't have reporting on it, but I do know there was some thinking he might not be there because of getting what everybody's been going through, which is this nasty cold season. It feels like 3 times worse than anything recently. Does having casino gauntlets back-to-back weeks for men and women greatly risk watering the gimmick down? They already do quite a few per year as is. And they're going to be men's and women's rumbles, men's and women. I mean, I don't know. I'm fine with it.
It's a lot better than putting them on the same show. I don't have a problem with it.
Yeah. I definitely didn't predict it, but I like the idea of a Hobbs Mox for the title next week. I do think that Hobbs has the potential to be a good, great babyface. Maximum Carnage is a perfectly named show for this. I didn't like Hobbs saying, let's shoot for a second. But to be honest, casual fans wouldn't know what that means anyway, and hardcore fans probably really don't care. No, hardcore fans are going to roll their eyes and think Hobbs is pandering, and he needs to grow out of 2005 and understand no one should be saying that on TV.
Wade, I'm sorry. What do you think of this whole Renee dynamic? constantly with. I don't know what you do about it because she's your best interviewer, but all these little awkward things about Moxley, and I don't know, like when Hobbs made that comment at the end.
Yep. I mean, I
feel like they overdo that.
It's imperfect, and it wouldn't normally advocate for this, but I would just ignore that they're together and make people wonder if they're estranged or separated and not talk about it.
I like that better than what they do. Yeah.
Yep.
Because she's so good at interviewing, but it's distracting to me.
So Hobbs said, "I'm going to make you my bitch," and JB says it feels like the most close to character of any wrestler on Dynamite, so I'll give him a pass. No need to reset the bitchometer, Wade. The pro wrestling's been better about it. The word bitch seems to, since I started the bitchometer, but it took about 4 or 5 weeks. But if shame kicked in, someone heard, yeah, we're overdoing it, and it feels like I haven't had to think about it for a while. I would wait a year before saying it on TV, no matter who I am. Honestly, I just think it was so overdone, and it just feels like such low-hanging fruit and trite. And I think if you say that on a promo, you have to be aware that people are going to think, you think that's edgy? Like, everybody said it for a while. So I would just not say it. It's like, living in your head rent-free. It's like that stopped being something to say 4 years ago. And if you're still saying it, it's like, you don't understand how just overused that was. It was cool like 7 years ago, but 3 years ago it was like, come on, let's stop saying that. So yeah, Dan.
Okada, you got to give Okada the exception.
Yeah, he is. That's the thing, because
that should be just for Okada.
Well, first of all, yes, it should be just for Okada for a variety of reasons, but he doesn't say it because he's trying to be badass.
I know.
He's saying it
great.
He's saying it like, I don't know if ironically is a word or subversively or something,
but yeah.
So to me, like the issue with the bitchometer is one, it just started being overdone, way overdone by so many people. It lost any, whoa, I can't believe he said it. And it was sort of the substitution for a good promo. It's like in good writing, exclamation marks and adjectives are a substitution for just choosing that perfect word that you don't know, but you should look up. Instead of saying very, very, very big, there's a better word for that, and you don't need an exclamation mark. Good writers pick one word that works. It was mind-blowing in first week of journalism class. They're like, don't use adjectives and adverbs. There's a lot of words you can choose from. Pick the word that bakes all that in. Don't just add an adjective in front of a common word. And by all means, don't use exclamation marks. Like in a casual email, of course, but like in journalism, you don't see it because it's amateur. And I just think saying bitch is an amateur hour go-to thing for lazy promos. That said, yes, Okada says it in a completely different way. He's not going for like edgy points and being oblivious to it. I wish Hobbs didn't say it, but I get JB's point. And if it's just him and Okada and Hobbs doesn't say it again, whatever. I'm not gonna. I sighed in my TV report. I go, do we need to reset the bitchometer? I didn't say reset. I said, do we have to? Okay, back to the email. If Hobbs gets proper attention, I think that he and Fletcher can be the breakout young stars of 2025. That being said, I worry about AEW giving them the needed attention and avoid the stop-and-start nature of their booking, which occurs far too often. Hobbs certainly has a look and credibility to give the illusion that he could beat Mox. The story just hasn't been told. I mean, it's just like Hobbs needs to seem like I don't want to be all meta about it, but like nobody thinks Hobbs is going to be AEW World Champion this year, and that doesn't mean he shouldn't get a world title match on TV on 1 week's notice. I mean, that's fine. He earned it in this match, but the match is designed to give somebody who unexpectedly can get a title shot who otherwise wouldn't, and that's what the Casino Gauntlet's a vehicle for. But he's nowhere near ready to be a centerpiece guy headlining pay-per-views. That would hurt him. So he's got to prove a lot more and stay healthy and improve his promos and have some really good matches that people would want to see in main events. And as much as he's earned a roster spot, and I think he's worth investing in, Dan, he's nowhere near that yet.
Yeah. And again, I know we mentioned earlier, losing a good match, it's a little overdone, but this is a story, and put him in a main event and give him that exposure, and give him. I'm fine with it. And I feel like it'll probably be pretty good.
I'd give Hobbs TV time every week before I'd give it to, I'm going to name names like Kyle O'Reilly, Roderick Strong, Matt Taven. I mean, there's a lot of people, and like I have respect for a lot of the people I just mentioned. One guy, no, but everybody else, yes. No, I don't mean and I like those guys, but like, come on. I mean, AEW is just full of just kind of sort of bland, interchangeable, stale characters who can give you a good match, but they don't need them to be getting TV time. That's the problem with even the Jarrett stuff. As good as Jarrett is in a certain way, and he very much is, and young guys can learn from him, they need to be in the business of pushing young, cool, contemporary people who haven't been defined down or been in such bad storylines. There's just a stench that follows them everywhere. Hobbs is different. He stands out. He's young. There's upside. He's not defined down, and he doesn't feel like you're trying to relive the NXT TakeOver era or the Ring of Honor 2000s era. There's something new and fresh about him, and I think that's AEW's key for growth. And it sucks because some guys are really good and hone their craft, but I'd send them all to ROH and focus on people like Hobbs and give him a try. If it doesn't work, so be it. You move someone else in that spot, but you got to go with him and don't give a bunch of TV time to people who are proven to not be needle movers.
Yep.
Jeff Jarrett's entrance did get a much bigger pop than I expected. Well, they were in his territory. Perhaps it was because they were in Tennessee. Okay, I'm ahead of him there. I'm a bit confused about all the time being put into Double J, but if they're going to do it, I don't think they're doing the worst job. That's where I am on it. It's a good job for something I wouldn't greenlight. He's not Sting, but perhaps there is a bit of juice they can get out of MGF and Double J in a Dynamite main event because they need 52 main events a year. 104. They need 2 big matches per show, really. Yeah, I mean, we talked about that earlier. MGF Double J, if that's where this is leading, and he's not going to spend a whole year talking about wanting to be world champ, which is just sort of like no one's buying it. It's a waste of TV time. Because Jarrett isn't Sting, he's not Cena. He's something else. But this is fine if it's just him showing up Double J and Double J showing some ass, but ultimately winning.
Sure. Yeah. No, it's like I said, it was a good segment. So, there's like you mentioned, there are things on TV that are less productive than this. So
if this feud can get MJF back on track, then it will have been worth it regardless. I thought that his promo tonight was his best in a while. I agree. I said that. He gets digs on Jarrett, but I didn't think they were too low hanging. They were rather clever. I liked him saying Jeff wins the title and then he gets first crack at it. That creates a nice red herring if and when Jarrett gets a TV main event title match. Maybe Jarrett's going to be the Iron Sheik, the transitional guy that allows Jarrett to win, or allows MJF to win the title without having to beat somebody who's in their prime. It's fine. I mean, it's not main event stuff for MJF, but it's. I mean, Jarrett. A lot you can say about Jarrett, Dan, and he's been part of a lot of bad stretches for different wrestling companies, and there's a stench with him, and for good reason in a lot of ways. But he's not incapable of having a good TV feud with MJF. I mean, that can be a young punk versus a respected, guy who's earned some goodwill with AEW fans over the past year. I mean, I'm fine with that. I just don't think the fake retirement trope last week and how long it went and reading his whole Wikipedia page, I thought that was overkill and a little tone deaf given the unfortunateness of some other things going on in AEW at the time too.
Yeah.
And then Jarrett held his own on the promo. The line of the night was "One Hit Wonder." And saying that chant would make a great T-shirt, which may or may not be a subtle dig at MGF, but maybe AEW as a whole. I don't think he meant it as a dig at AEW, but yeah, it felt like a little out of. It's kind of like a Bret Hart moment, where it's like he has a thought and he says it. It's not in the script, but he couldn't help himself. And it was fun. It felt real.
Yeah, that was good.
He says, how am I supposed to feel about the heel face dynamic in the Mariah May Cameron match set for Collision? It feels like they're going to turn Cameron face because the crowd already loves her, but I feel as though they should do it more definitively. There's been too many sudden turns spread out across too many shows in recent AEW history. Any thoughts on that, Dan?
Look, I mean, she's like, as others have said, she makes the most of her TV time. She's incredibly compelling. But like, she's not currently a big enough deal that I think people are too focused on whether she is a face or a heel. So I think she's a little bit of a blank canvas for most of the audience. So I think they can, I think they can certainly have her turn face, and it would be perfectly fine because, like I said, I mean, they even put her on with the 12 days of AEW or whatever. I mean, like, it just, everything she does is really great. And, I mean, and they both played into their attractiveness, which is fine too. So there you go.
Yeah. I got a kick out of the rolling chairs. Like, that's a good way to just insert yourself into a promo. There was someone someday may do that on a podcast. Who knows? Was the rattled Tony Storm we saw tonight supposed to be part of her storyline in pursuit of the title that she lost? Are we supposed to believe that her confidence is shaken and that's part of her journey back to the top? It came across to me like I'm a rookie and I was supposed to lose. Like she lost memory, and it's like, oh, those two, is an honor to be in the ring with them. I guess I'm not at their level yet. That's how I took it.
Yeah. And if it's part of a fake, fake amnesia thing, and she comes in and wins the gauntlet next week, and they do go straight to her and Mariah, and she reveals herself to be playing this game, then that's fine too.
Yeah.
But you wouldn't, if you were really faking amnesia, this wouldn't be the week to be like, oh, I'm faking amnesia. Like, you need to keep building it up to when you can actually win the title. So there was nothing. Yeah, exactly. No matter where they're going with this, there was nothing that happened tonight that I thought was wrong. And I think it does do something for Statlander to win that match with Tony Storm, even as a bit of a confused Tony Storm. So
yeah. All right, finally, JB, as far as Kenny Omega goes, I hated Kenny's new entrance music tonight. Interesting. It gave me Indiana Jones and the Legend of the Hidden Temple vibes. Kenny's passion, though, really shined tonight. I felt what he was saying, and I'm certain that he's serious, determined that this serious, determined vision of Omega can be incredibly compelling in and of itself against Callis and his family to start. Ospreay with the Omega save really opens up the directions they can go in 2025 and beyond, which is very exciting. I'm excited for Ospreay and Omega against Callis family tag, which is likely on the horizon. As always, love the show, and go VIP. Yeah, I wasn't sold on it. I mentioned on a couple podcasts, including this one in recent weeks, that I heard from someone in AEW that Kenny's gonna be grounded and real and really connect with the audience. They're gonna talk about his journey, and they're going to use that as a foundation to build on. And they're going to, they understand there's work to be done. I sort of entered this, I'd said, I'll believe it when I see it, but I was told the right things were going to be done with Kenny, that they were cognizant of the need to sort of not build his character for the ground up, but hit the reset button and build on the fact that he's been away for a year and there's some new story to tell with him. There's this, I almost had to retire. I almost died. It made me realize how much I have nothing but this. Who am I if not for this? And I'm going to put everything on the line for it. I think they see it as a really good foundation to build on. And I thought this seemed like, okay, yeah. Now, AEW has a lot of things for a week or two. Ratings and the Bucks booking matches and Moxley trying to take over and everyone standing outside the building to fend him off, on and on. I mean, AEW has a lot of things for 2 to 3 weeks. And then they just lose focus. So we'll see, but this is a good start.
And I think that's why when we spoke about this earlier, I was so pro, let's go with Kenny, because that needs to be the mission of the company right now, so they don't blow this.
Yep. And don't get bored. Don't try something new. Map out, honestly, map out 6 months of TV with him and storyboard it and be like, in January, these are the notes we're going to hit. In February, these are the notes we're going to hit. Here's a pivotal match. Now let's work backwards from that pivotal moment, and how are we going to tell that story, and at what pace and in what setting that keeps things fresh, and with who he's interacting with. There'll be this Renee interview, sit-down interview here. There'll be this angle and a fired-up promo by Omega here. Then there'll be this match. He wins. His friends will come out. Map it out. There's so much to tell. There's so much granular grit that you can get into. And then after this big match, what are we doing the next week, and the week after that, and the week after that? Literally map out 30 weeks of Kenny Omega and know every week what you're doing with them, and stay the course, unless something comes up where you think, someone gets hurt or somebody gets red hot or something happens with Kenny where we got to, whatever. I mean, you have to be able to adjust on the fly, but basically have a plan penciled in. And I don't know if Tony puts that level of granular, detailed time into it, but I think that's what we learned is the Sami Zayn story, the Cody Rhodes story, these long story arcs that people get into in WWE was a part of the reason why it's part of the reason why they're selling out these buildings and setting records and charging what they're charging and holding up well viewership wise, despite declining cable subscriptions relative to what's happening with AEW. And there's a lot of noise and mixed things here and there that affect that. But you got to tell a big story arc with a top star that should be weaved into your program. And Kenny's a chance to do that. They've done it a little bit with with Ospreay, and then disappeared for a few weeks at a time and whatever. And they're trying to tell that with Toni Storm, and then she's gone for a while, which is good. That was kind of part of the story. It fed into it. So it's not like they never do it, but and they tried to do it with Hangman Page at times, but it just never really. And they obviously tried to do it with MJF and Michael Cole, and there were injuries and other things that came up. But if they can keep Kenny healthy and get a plan and execute it, I think that's one of the keys to growth. And I think everybody's hungry for that. I think everybody, even people who think Kenny is the negatives about him. He's kind of weird and he's not really focused and is motivated in ways that aren't really what AEW needs to grow. They're just ways to get big star ratings and match of the year votes. I think everybody's rooting for Kenny to have a showcase centerpiece year where he's a difference maker and, yes, a needle mover. And the stage is set for it. And this was a good start.
Yeah, and the thing is like, I have nothing against him going against Brian Cage next week. I'm concerned about, is this part of something bigger? Or did they say, who can he have a good match with next week and we can take advantage of this buzz?
Yeah.
And those are two very different questions. If this is like, hey, we are going to build maybe him and Ospreay against the Callis family at the Australia show or whatever, but there needs to be, I'm not against him wrestling next week, but every time he wrestles, it should be a pretty big deal and it should lead to something. And I'm worried they were just like, oh, well, okay, who can he wrestle next week and have a fun match? They don't want to squat. They didn't do that in New Japan. They built that thing and they had to because of his injuries, but they built that match with Gabe Kidd for 3 or 4 months.
Yeah.
And it paid off in spades. And that's what you need.
And Brian Cage is not going to have a, Tokyo Dome main event, push. I don't think you're advocating for that, but it would have been nice if Brian Cage had a few singles wins over the past month and they thought ahead and they said, on January 15th, we're going to have Kenny and Brian Cage. Let's actually have Brian Cage. Let's have a 6-week stretch where he gets 3 big wins on TV and even some wins that are we're like, do we want him to beat this guy? And because we want Kenny beating him to mean something and we want to pop a rating when Kenny faces him. But AEW doesn't do that.
And I'm repeating myself, but that's the problem. This feels kind of random. And it just has my antenna up to be worried.
I don't think it's random. I just don't think it's as well built as it could be. I think there's a point to it based on the angle we saw, tonight. I think it's at least a TV storyline to feud with the Callis family at this point, and Cage is the first guy up to do the job, and they'll work their way up. I think that's the plan. I just wish they had made Brian Cage feel like more of a threat. Brian Cage and Lance Archer are like two guys who, they show up and they act like they're these undefeated, like Kane-like characters, and it's like, no, they never win. They never win. And so stop pretending they're Kane, and they're a threat. You got to give them some wins and invest in them for the match with Kenny. If Kenny beats him to matter. I wish they did that with Buddy. I wish he had gotten a few wins on TV and that they could showcase like his year, but there was no like, he's on a hot streak and all that. They had a different story they wanted to tell after the match, so I was more forgiving. But if they had just beat him and moved on, that would have been worse. Yeah,
and by random, I guess I mean it came out of nowhere. And it may not be leading to something in the future.
Yeah. Derek in the chat says, does his direction with Kenny feel like what WWE did with Roman when he announced his leukemia diagnosis and he left and came back and said his leukemia was in remission? I mean, there's a similar kind of reset to this where it's like, hey, Kenny needed a reset, and needed a new mission and a new foundation. And, it's real life. Yeah, it's reminiscent of that. All right, let's go to Zach Barber, another video caller here, PWTorch contributor with the AEW Feud Tracker. Must read's not a word, but it is a worthwhile read. I should tell people
must read fine for me.
Well, I feel like it's not my place to tell people you must read this. It sounds a little pushy. And I was just complaining with Jason Powell yesterday about how when I went to the Timberwolves game a few weeks back where I got my cold and I'm still hoarse from it. The announcer's like, defense. And it wasn't like encouraging it. It was almost like hectoring me, like insisting, and it's like, we're losing by 30 points and nobody wants to be here anymore. And you're like yelling and giving me a headache going, defense. It's like, I'll chant defense when I think my team is the least bit interested in playing defense. But otherwise, it's not my job to remind them of what their job is. So shut up. And
I don't like the artificial noise in NBA games. That's why I go to college games for that reason.
So So Zach, I'm trying not to be a hypocrite by saying you must do something, but I think it's worthwhile reading. It's a really good primer for getting, if you missed Collision especially, or you need a reminder of things, and you always have good opinions. So, although not enough
Thank
commas.
you.
Yes.
Well, yeah, I'm terrible with grammar.
No, you're not. You are not terrible with grammar. You just
Not grammar, but
you need more commas.
Comma game is off.
Yeah. All right. Enough inside baseball. Go ahead, Zach.
But I just kind of want to jump on because you were talking about, them talking about work rate earlier, and for me, it's just like I would rather hear them talk about work rate than WWE started Raw off with 20 minutes of like patting themselves on the back and being all self-referential and having The Rock get people to cheer for spending more money than they've ever spent on a WWE show.
I'd rather eat cold pizza than moldy oatmeal. Yes, but that's not an endorsement of. I mean, like, you can bring up something WWE does worse, but you should have higher standards than. You're right. Yes, I'd rather have them talk about work rate than what WWE did on Monday. Overly selling Netflix, but that I would rather have you talk about whether they should be talking about work rate rather than saying relative to something that obviously was not unbearable, but pretty close to it. Overbearing is a word.
Overbearing is a good word. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so yes, I'd rather they talk about work rate, but they still shouldn't be talking about work rate because I think it displaces what they actually should be doing. It's like loading up on junk food before the nutritious meal comes. Like they don't have any energy left to do what they need to do to expand their audience and tell actual stories if they just think, well, we're going to have the match of the year, so let's just lean on that, and then they check out. And I want them to put more time into it, as we just meticulously explained they should be doing for Kenny and mapping out his whole year.
Yeah, I agree with a lot of what you were mapping out just a minute ago about Kenny. You gotta sort of maximize his minutes because you don't know what his health is gonna be at any given time.
And he's guaranteed he's not slowing down. Hopefully that's not true.
I think that match on Sunday kind of proved that. Like I said in my column,
now he proved it. Now slow down. We want you to survive.
I'm not sure he's human. I mean, given he was almost dead, and then he had that match on Sunday. But nonetheless, what's the other thing? I do like Kenny and Ospreay, sort of the 2024 version of the Mega Powers.
Yeah, I saw that in the chat. Yeah, you mentioned that.
Yeah.
Yep.
Without but neither one of them are like Hogan and trying to like Bigfoot the other.
Right.
Thank goodness.
Yeah, I mean they can tell a buddy story. I mean, they're not that different in age, but they're different enough. And not that Hogan and Savage was like some mentor protege thing. No. Hogan's a bigger star and all that. It was it was a little Batman and Robin, but Savage was great. So I get what you're saying. I mean, yeah. I mean, if they tell a buddy story with those two, and they start tonight with not sure they can trust each other, but there's respect. And if you're Ospreay, you got to hear what Kenny said and be like, kind of respect what he said. I've got to, hit the reset button on some of my thoughts and some of our past, but their dynamic is not canon in AEW any more than Omega and Okada is. So they got to tell that story. Like we're on the first 5 pages of a 400-page novel, and they can't treat it like they're on page 395 and they've sold people on it. You got to tell the story within canon of AEW. Every character in a new novel has a backstory, but you still tell the story. You tell the new story. So there's a new story. They have a history, but it's time to tell a new story and use that history to drive that new story. Dan, does that make sense the way I'm saying that?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, there's really in AEW no history between these guys, so you can't assume.
Well, they had the match at Forbidden Door 2 years ago.
Okay.
Well, in a way that saying no history is they're in canon. There's not like they stand in a ring and we're just picking up where we left off on something that people are invested in. Like that's not a story. That's a match. So that's part of their history. But this is not like Sami Zayn, Zach, you love it. I'll bring up if Sami Zayn crosses paths with Roman Reigns or Jimmy Uso, there is a ton of canon that people who watch WWE go, whoa, I know all kinds of stuff that makes this. Or if Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens cross paths, it's within WWE's ecosystem. There's all this stuff that fans instantly conjure up. But if Braun Breaker had something he did in NXT, a one-off match with whoever, and then he shows up and crosses paths with him, okay, they have a history. I acknowledge that, but it's a small history. You got to build a new story with Braun Breaker, even if there is some past where he crossed paths with a wrestler in NXT. And I think that's just how AEW would best approach this.
Forbidden Door is a little different than NXT. I mean, it's part of the same thing.
In a way that I don't think matters to my point. I mean, it's a little bit, it's kind of a, Forbidden Door as a gimmick, it's sort of a, it started off as sort of a gimmick pay-per-view, kind of a little bit different than just pure storyline driven. Your point is accurate, but it doesn't change my point, which is there wasn't a week-to-week, month-to-month, long-term storyline that fans were emotionally invested in and went on a roller coaster ride. Ospreay and Omega have that, but it isn't self-evident immediately when they just cross paths like they did tonight. So you can say it's there, but now it's time to start telling a new story with them, pulling from that past. Don't ignore the past, but don't think you're at the end of your novel. You're at the beginning of a new novel with them. Put the time and effort in to tell a new story with them, using their background as a foundation to build on.
That makes sense. But the only other thing I would say is, isn't like everything canon for AEW? Isn't that like the whole point that like people's history and different
which is why they're drawing
we lost Dan.
2000
people's history and different like promotions is canon, like
in a way, but that's why they're drawing 2,400 people and they're not selling 9,000 tickets. Like, yes, that's true, but that doesn't mean it's the best approach. It doesn't mean you can have that and also write a new novel on your own TV, on national cable, on national streaming Max. My argument is AEW relies too much on what you're saying, which is we're so proud of incorporating all these things that thousands of people here and there over the last 10 years have seen. But you are telling a week-to-week story with 4 hours of television. Tell new stories, build on that future, but don't just think, oh, Okada and Kenny, everybody wants to see this. It's going to be a great year for business. That's their background is the starting point. It's the first 10 pages of your novel, but you're getting to write the novel. Your characters have a history, and novels tell the story of the past that characters have. But you want a new story that you're excited about that you tell. Don't just talk about only the past. And I don't think they will. So
I'll be at All In person. So however they get to Okada and Kenny, I don't care.
Right.
As long as I get to see that match.
But Zach,
you're happy camper.
What you just said is you are the problem, because they know they got your ticket. I'm not talking about you. I'm saying, how do they get more people? And your ticket's already sold, but that's not enough. They need to sell other people on it. Yeah, they need to sell other people. That's my point. So you being happy is great. And I don't say this as often as I used to, but it's not all about you. It's about expanding the audience.
And the other thing I was talking about was the women's division. I agree with Dan. Harley Cameron is hilarious. She is a treasure. To me, Toni Storm's whole amnesia thing, I think she's going to reveal to be, a ruse, because she obviously has well documented like mental health issues, and so this is just sort of playing into that, and she's going to have one of the sort of what did I say last week? Sort of like Linda McMahon standing up from the from the wheelchair. She's supposed to be sedated at WrestleMania 17, and like that kind of moment where it's like, Mariah may think she has no idea what's anything that's happened, and like Toni Storm has her right where she wants her. That's going to be a moment. They have told the story so well. If they pull this off, they just give RJ City the book at this point. Like he knows what he's doing.
Yeah. Yeah, it's fun. I'm along for the ride. I don't have complaints about it. It's not for everybody, apparently. But I think Tony Storm and Mariah May are gold, and they're telling it comes across to me as a story that matches what I said. I think 3 months ago they kind of had an idea of where they would be on January 8th, 2025. There's chapters and it's planned, and they're executing it patiently but consistently. And they know what the end point is, or roughly, You on board with it, Dan? Tony Storm and her act?
Yeah, and I like the fact that right now Tony's not really on Mariah May's radar, it seems like, which is how it should be, because she conquered that, and now my enemy seems confused and out of it, and I'm just gonna focus on these other people that are well below me, as she said during the interview tonight. So it's logical in a weird way, and it's progressing pretty well.
Yeah. All right, what else, Zach?
Last thing before I go, how long before we see Beth Phoenix on Dynamite? Because I mean, clearly with and I refuse to call him with Adam Copeland feuding with the Death Riders, and Marina Shafir being a prime part of that. He's going to have to get some FTR and hitting her with a shatter machine. I mean, she might have got a Blade Runner, but I think that's probably a step too far. So we're going to have to get he's going to have to recruit his wife to deal with the Marina factor, right?
Yeah, I like it. Dan?
Assuming that this thing with Adam Copeland and Moxley carries on for a while, then that makes a lot of sense. I'm not sure that I want to stretch this out that much. But
I don't either. I was down for Copeland winning the Casino Gauntlet tonight and getting that match over with.
Yeah.
But I mean, because it is that match, as I said, it was the least exciting of the choices for a Moxley match, but whatever.
At least Excalibur, I think it was, did the first time talk about Adam Copeland. He said, Adam Copeland, also known as Cope. I'm like, okay, I can live with that. I mean, it's just, it's
making it official. It's just like,
I heard
I don't understand what he's trying to, because I have to assume that was his idea, because Tony Khan doesn't seem to be the person to like change people's names. He had so many Adams and Pages and Cages and
it definitely was his idea.
And I mean, just because you have Adam Copeland and Adam Cole and Adam Page, and is there another Adam? I know there's a couple Cages running around. Like that's not, and so people were shouting Adam, and 3 or 4 people turned around. So you're like, oh, Cope, like instead of Copeland. Like, yeah, they might have said that to get your attention. It doesn't mean that has to be your new cool name. Like Adam Copeland is fine as a wrestler name. Yeah, that's the issue. All right, cool. Zach, always fun when you chime in. Good to see you.
Yes, sir. Have a good night, y'all.
So Zach
travels, Dan.
Thank you.
Zach says you must read his column at PWTorch.com. It's in the opinion section. AW Feud Tracker. I say it's worthwhile reading because I don't want to be too pushy. By the way, regarding Forbidden Door, Durrell says in response to Zach, we can't say Forbidden Door is canon when they won't talk about anything from Wrestle Dynasty. And well, yeah, they talk about some, but yeah, nothing too specific. And then Goodfella 1422 says, I have no idea about Kenny and Ospreay. Like we have people on this show who like beg AEW to, it's fine that wrestlers you're featuring have history and you can refer to it. It's your canon can extend beyond TBS and TNT. But you should be telling new stories that pulls from that background. Don't think that background is your story and you're arriving at the match. You are at the beginning of writing the Omega Ospreay novel, the beginning of the Kenny Okada novel, and think of it that way. And yes, as we read novels, we learn about characters' backstory. Like that's a big thing. There's flashbacks and references to the past, and we learn about them as we go. And there's a history between characters that doesn't just form at the beginning of every novel. At the very start, that's fine. When there's a mom and a son, they might start out the book and there's a new story being told, but they refer to things in the past between them. That's that kind of storytelling I want AEW to do. So point made, I hope. I mean, like that, and I think they're capable of it. But it does take a little shift in their approach, which I think sometimes is in a little bit of an social media echo chamber. It's like, well, star ratings, match of the year, heaping praise on us for gifting America these great Japanese dream matches. And it's like, yes, that's true, but you've got a weekly show. Write a novel with these characters that you've signed and inherited. So,
well, and again, like, it's worse to kind of allude to a past and then you never explain it. And they seem to do that too often because, as you said, they assume everybody knows it. I mean, I'm pretty certain that New Japan will let you show footage given your partnership. So if you're going to, have that as part of your story, which I think it's logical to do that, then, explain it. That's all. You have enough TV time.
But I don't want the Omega Ospreay story to be 85%. There's all this stuff we're going to catch you up on so that you should care about this match. I want that to be 15% of the story.
Right.
I want them to tell a new story that pulls from that past, but I want to see it with my own eyes in real time, what it is that makes me care a lot.
What we saw tonight, I guess my reference is what we saw tonight is this apprehension and Ospreay, the good guy, holding the chair at Kenny. Like, that doesn't make any sense.
So
what I'm saying is what's on your TV needs to make sense.
Yeah, it is a whole other point, and it overlaps greatly, and you're absolutely right. I mean, I say a whole other point in the sense that what I'm wishing for tonight wasn't a good start, because there are times where it's like, he doesn't trust him, so he'll pretend he's going to bash him with the chair. Why would he bash him with the chair? Why would he do that? That makes no sense. It's a good point late in the show here, but that doesn't seem like something Ospreay would do or ought to even be thinking about doing. And there's a lot of things, stories told on television that where wrestlers are acting in a way which just doesn't feel quite natural, and you should work to avoid that. Yeah. So in that sense, a bad start. Yeah. But you can tell the story. Ospreay Ospreay's a different person, but when he sees Kenny, he gets triggered. There's baggage there, and he finds himself going to a different place. Well, Zach Barber's protesting that since he didn't really act like he was going to hit him. I mean, he had the chair from fending off others, but I thought the announcers kind of played into like it took him a while to drop that chair, but maybe it was in self-defense of what he thought Kenny would do to him.
Again, why? I mean, I don't know. I just, none of it, those two characters, you're coming to save a guy who just talked about how he almost died, and you've been nothing but a good guy, really, recently, at least in AEW. I thought he kind of was holding that chair pretty tensely, like he was worried about something.
Yeah. Derek Mitchell says, it's good AEW that has good matches, but not every match needs to be Dynamite Kid, Tiger Mask from Japan. I've been conditioned to episodic TV going back to Mid-South in the Memphis days. So anyway, Dan, anything else you want to bring up from the show tonight?
No, I really didn't have that many notes tonight. And we had a really good conversation about, the focus, which is and should be Kenny Omega out of tonight. And so, and a little bit on Hobbs, which I think is I would give that Gauntlet Battle Royal a B+ A-. I thought for the way they used TV time, it was good. I wouldn't say the women's match was a main event, but it kind of was. It was the last match. Yeah. And, they had star power there, and it was reasonably good and told a story. So, not like an all-time episode of Dynamite, but a pretty easy 2 hours, and pretty easy 2 hours talking with you and the callers. Wade, I enjoyed it.
Yeah, it's fun. Sometimes I'm like, are we gonna just have an hour, 10 minutes to talk about? But we got like almost an hour of Kenny just out of the gate, so that worked. Want to encourage people to become a VIP member, support us. If you like our approach, our tone to covering wrestling, just try to be level-headed and fair-minded and not bombastic and not phony for the sake of manufacturing drama. And I think we bring a lot of experience and just sort of, try to understand not just what's happening, but why it's happening. And not play favorites unless it's deserved. You know, I mean, like we're going to say what we like and say what we don't like, but we're not just going in with a bias to blindly praise and criticize certain things. And so if you like that, you're going to like being a VIP member. PWTorch.com/GoVIP gives you full details on all the perks that come with membership. Our podcasts that are free are presented on our PWTorch VIP podcast feed, which is compatible with Apple Podcasts, by the way, compatible with Spotify, Patreon, Android and iOS apps all across the board. And it's just a single click. You don't have to go to advanced settings, worry about passwords or any of that. We got a really slick system set up. You'll get an email, you click it, you're in. PWTorch.com/GoVIP gives you details on the perks that come with it. Not just ad-free versions of our free shows, but a ton of VIP exclusive shows, including the Fix with Todd Martin, post pay-per-view roundtables, everything with Rich and Wade. Rich and I just did 4 hours, two-hour podcasts marching through Q1 and Q2 of 2024 and talking about the cover stories of the Pro Wrestling Torch Weekly newsletter each of those weeks and reflecting on them and talking about their impact. We had a wide array of topics, and Rich follows and watches everything, and it was a really good conversation with him. That's VIP exclusive. Part 2 is VIP exclusive. Part 1 ran last week. So jump on in. And it'll take you a long time to catch up, but we got 20 plus years of podcasts, hundreds of retro radio shows turned into podcasts in our archives from the 1990s, over 1,800 back issues of the Pro Wrestling Torch newsletter, and an ad-free website that's just fast loading and slick and smooth, and exclusive articles you won't get without being a VIP member. So check us out, pwtorch.com/GoVIP. You can also get a 7-day free trial through Spotify and Patreon. Search PWTorch VIP in Spotify or Patreon and activate your 7-day free trial. You can also search PWTorch in Apple Podcasts, and the charcoal black logo will show up, PWTorch VIP. Subscribe to that, and you can upgrade using your Apple account and unlock all of our VIP shows that way. So lots of ways to go, depending on whatever platform you're on or whatever ecosystem you like. And we'd love to have your support. PWTorch.com/GoVIP. Thanks to Dan Kuester, my co-host, and thanks to our listeners, our callers, and everybody else. Dan, safe travels, and we will talk to you soon.
Thanks, Wade. Enjoyed it.
Yep. Thanks, everybody. We'll talk to you next time.